across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. Absolute pleasure to be back. I hope you've had a great Christmas. Hope you had a wonderful New Year as well. I've been on my travels. You know me, never knowingly undersold by Judith Chalmers. But I am back, raring to go. And if I ever had any worries about a quiet January start, well, that was all out of the door on Saturday, was it not, when we saw that extraordinary raid by American forces on Venezuela and the seizure of the leader of that country. The fallout from that, absolutely huge. So much to talk about what was happening, not just abroad, but also at home on that as well. And I cannot wait to get into that. I can't wait to get your thoughts on all of it, because everyone's given their tuppence buzzing. Because, by the way, come Monday, the 5th of January, we are all experts on Venezuela, are we not? Well, we're certainly going to aim to be. We've got fantastic guests coming on the show throughout, particularly later on in the show. A guest who's one of the many 8 million Venezuelan exiles living in the States. He's an economist who just talked to us about it. What has actually happened in Venezuela over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the reason why so many people have left, and the reason why it's such a basket case country, despite being the home of basically the largest oil reserves in the world. This should be, Dubai, on steroids, but it isn't. So we're going to talk about all of that. And basically, whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is so fabulous to have your company. Can't wait to get your thoughts on all the big topics as well. In particular, I want to ask you, was Donald Trump, very simple question, was he right or wrong to launch the military raid to arrest the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife? Simple as that. He's appearing in court later today about 5 p.m. UK time with his wife. But I want to know, tell us why you think it was right. Tell us why you think it was wrong. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. As you already know, you can text the word talk as well and send your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at talkTV. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Let me tell you a little bit more about what is coming up. And by the way, if you miss anything on the show, you can go to my YouTube page. What have we called it? You know which are on about this, the Julia Hartley-Brewer show. Hit subscribe, never have to miss a thing. But we are going to be talking about the ousted Venezuelan leader appearing in the New York court later today. He's going to be facing charges of narco-terrorism, conspiracy and cocaine trafficking, seized, as we know, on Saturday by that raid authorised by Donald Trump by special forces on Saturday. Now, Trump has declared that the US will now run the oil-rich country. Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, was sworn in as president to serve as the interim leader, and she's been given a very clear warning: do as you're told or you're going to face a worse fate than Maduro. Donald Trump has also threatened military action against Colombia if they don't reduce the flow of illicit drugs to the US. And he's also now set his sights on a takeover of Greenland for, he says, defence reasons, surrounded, he says, by Chinese and Russian ships. Meanwhile, back here at home, Keir Starmer's refused to describe Trump's actions as a breach of international law. Other European leaders have done so. There's growing criticism from, well, frankly, let's be honest, the usual suspects on the Labour backbenches. But today is also, it's a Monday, and Sam Armstrong, who's also here in the studio with me, can vouch for this, it's also another reset day for this Prime Minister. And he is announcing that his cost of living reset and how much better off we all are or will be. I mean, all of those are absolute nonsense at the same time as he's apparently plotting a full-scale Brexit betrayal. He wants even closer alignment with the single market, and we know what that means. Well, all of that coming up, as I say, so much to talk about. And joining me for all the chat is commentator Sam Armstrong. Happy New Year and happy Monday morning to you.
Good morning, Happy New Year.
So much to talk about. I mean, look, I'll put the question to you straight for, was Donald Trump right or wrong to launch that military raid?
Look, Donald Trump is the President of the United States of America. His job...
And of Venezuela at the moment, apparently.
His job is to act in the interests of the American people. And You don't need to be an expert on geopolitics to recognise that the actions of President Maduro and the Venezuelan government were very bad for the United States. They would become the global hub of drug smuggling right into the United States, and had done so for a long time in breach of a number of warnings, and they were doing so deliberately at the behest of their geopolitical masters around the world, which are Russia and China, in order to destabilise the US. And Donald Trump had a simple job: to look after the American people. And in launching this operation, which was one of the most audacious, spectacular, brilliant pieces of military
since the
planning.
Second World War, according to Donald Trump.
But look, I mean, it really was, because you only have to look back to realise that these things don't always go that right. Yeah. You Black Hawk Down, you know, think back in time, you recognise that these things are precarious. Even going to get Osama bin Laden, who frankly had much less protection than Maduro did, a helicopter was lost and things went wrong. This was flawless.
It was textbook, it really was.
It was a brilliant piece of work. And the result is that America is now a safer and going to be a more prosperous place. But critically, so will the people of Venezuela, by the way.
This is absolutely crucial, because as we get all the lefties and all the sort of bleeding heart human rights lawyers going, oh, isn't it awful, isn't it awful? People of Venezuela are largely very happy, given that 80% of them voted for the opposition last year in an election which was totally rigged, and basically, oh, what a surprise, Maduro won it. I mean, this guy has no democratic mandate or authority whatsoever. What do you make? I mean, they are absolutely cheering and celebrating. They've been crying out for some sort of action to be taken place. Here's the thing. We've got the usual suspects back home, and they're criticising Keir Starmer, who, I mean, I do sympathise with him on some of these occasions. It's not often I say that, where you are caught in that middle of, like, all of his instincts as Mr. Human Rights lawyer and Mr. Lefty is to go, this is outrageous, Donald Trump, and outrageous, ignoring the basis of, the post-war order and international law and all of that, but actually understanding realpolitik, doesn't matter what you say, you're just going to annoy the President of the United States and get a worse trade deal, and more tariffs and things. If you do annoy him, it's not going to make any difference. But also understanding that, again, this is about spheres of interest. But it is absolutely fascinating, the number of people who do. The people who've been cheering on Hamas and now, are very, very, very quiet about the protests in Iran. Because they don't care about those people in Iran. They don't apparently, it would appear, care about the Palestinians very much, because they're quite happy to have Hamas in charge of them in Gaza. But they care desperately about Maduro. This isn't up for debate, because this is one of the things I find extraordinary is how little of the coverage I've watched on mainstream media over the weekend they just vaguely skirted over, like, the troubles that Venezuela's been in. And if they do talk about the troubles, they'll say, well, he has been indicted on drug trafficking, and he has been involved in corruption, and he has been involved in, the basket case economy of the country, which was already there under Chavez, by the way, but he put it on steroids. But it's always done like, well, with the American embargoes, that was a problem. The country was in a dire strait before the American embargoes instituted under Trump. Biden lifted them. The country did not do better. Doesn't matter what happens to the oil price, the country with the largest known oil reserves in the world, a country that was first world, it was one of the richest countries per capita in the world in the 1970s, is a complete basket case where people are being forced to eat their pets. People don't have running water, they don't have electricity, people are living hand to mouth, rummaging through rubbish in the streets for food to eat for their children. And people are just saying, but Maduro is an absolute crook. He's socialism, corruption, drug trafficking, on every count. This guy should not be in office, and it's a great thing that he's not in office anymore. And yet so many are just saying, oh, it's a terrible thing because the rule of law, a sovereign state. That's just abject, pie in the sky, lefty nonsense, isn't it?
Well, there are two categories of people here. The first are the international global left, who are organised, and they have a set series of friends, the chief of which are actually, and I make no apologies for saying this, Russia and China and the global socialist movement, which has existed for a very long time. They're the same people that have always been at it. You have to understand that Venezuela was a puppet state of the authoritarian axis on earth. If you're looking for evidence, look at the people who were killed in the operation to take Maduro. 32 of the 40 were not Venezuelan. They were Cubans, because the Cubans send in, on behalf of the Russian and Chinese masters, and indeed some Iranian influence, their own security force to guard Maduro, make sure he does the right thing. Now, let's be clear about who this man is. There are 15,000 political prisoners in Venezuela right now. There are 8 million refugees scattered around the world. He killed in protests last year, shot 25 protesters for protesting against his election. Innocent protesters.
Peacefully,
The UN has found he routinely electro-tortures his political opponents, and 82% of Venezuelan people live in abject, total, appalling poverty. This is a country that should be, as you say, basically the Dubai of the Western world. It has massively more oil than Saudi Arabia, and yet is in appalling poverty. And these people on the left who are opposed will always oppose what the West does, because they're on the side of those that hates the Western world and are determined to tear it down. And it was interesting to see they couldn't quite muster as many protesters when they couldn't rely on the anti-Semitic Islamists as they normally do. However, there's another bunch who are as irrelevant as daisies, led by our own Prime Minister. I don't know what the Papua New Guinean president said about this operation, but it's about as relevant as what Keir Starmer had to say about it. And they are parallel. They have been going on for years and years. They've been issuing tweets, they've been putting out letters saying that they stand with the Venezuelan people. Well, I'm sorry, but if standing with the Venezuelan people does not include taking the president, who is so grotesquely persecuting them, in an expert, precision, surgical operation, taking him back to face trial in a court of law, if you're not prepared to stand with that, then I don't know what your rule of law is, but it's not a law that I want to follow.
But there's a very big thing in the West about this idea regime change is not allowed, it's not acceptable, it's not. I've got no. Regime change should absolutely, whether it's Iran, whether it's North Korea, whether it's in Russia, China, absolutely. The thing is, you can't take on some countries because they're too big. This is a small country. Now, the only thing is, you do get this argument, and I can see some honesty in this argument, which is, well, if America does this and everyone says that's fine, what is the difference between this and, say, Putin invading Ukraine or China seizing Taiwan?
The idea that the world has been kept secure by this post-war kumbaya moment where we all decided that it was a good idea that we stopped invading each other after millennia of doing exactly that is utter, abject, total, for the birds nonsense.
I think you'll find peace has been kept by the EU.
One thing, and one thing alone, has kept the world safe, which is the massively overwhelming military force of the United States that has imposed its basic global values across the world. And that was basically sustainable for the entirety of the period from 1940 through to about 2010. That is beginning to change. And by the way, that always included the United States being able to go and pick up dodgy dictators around the world, as it did in the 90s with Manuel Noriega, the president of Nicaragua, who went and got picked up by George H.W. Bush. You didn't hear them squealing then. The world is beginning to change. And the way you need to know that, all you need to see to know that, is Russia is busily going around and invading everybody it so chooses. And China is basically seizing great parts of the sea and all the rest of it.
There is so many more topics I want to talk about. We've got no more. We're going to go to a guest very soon, because after a quick break, and then we'll get to your calls afterwards. And I do want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Do you think Donald Trump was right or wrong to launch military aid? But I also want to know your thoughts on Keir Starmer. And the situation he's in. He, by the way, has got his latest reset with the cost of living pledges. He says he's still going to be Prime Minister this time next year. He's also says that he does sort of regret his support for Alaa Abdel al-Fattah, the British Egyptian activist, who basically, as far as I can tell, the Foreign Office's entire purpose in life was trying to get this horrible, very, very dangerous man out of an Egyptian prison. But apparently he didn't know. He just didn't know that he'd written all these horrible messages, basically calling for Jews and Westerners and the British military and others to be killed. Didn't know, which is a bit of a worry. I want to get your thoughts on all of that, Sam, in just a few moments, and your thoughts as well. So do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. First up, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get to another guest, and then we're going to be taking your calls. So get your calls in now. This is Talk.
until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great, but the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's 10:19. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is indeed Talk. Just to let you know, we were going to talk in about 10 minutes' time about Keir Starmer's latest reset. I think it's the 219th, I don't know. But his reset has already descended into chaos. He had a live stream of his address to Labour Party members as he addressed activists in Berkshire today, talking about the cost of living, and the live stream basically was cut off within seconds. Oh, you got to see the funny side, but there we are. I'm sure he won't. I'm sure he's absolutely livid, probably not even aware of it yet, that no one's watching, no one cares. Oh, I'm Prime Minister, no one believes a word you say either. Anyway, let's wonder whether or not the President of the United States cares what Keir Starmer thinks about his raid on Venezuela and the arrest of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Let's talk about that right now with my next guest, Freddie Gray. He's Deputy Editor and US Editor of The Spectator magazine and joins us. A very good morning to you, Freddie.
Good morning, Julia. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Do you think Donald Trump gives two hoots what other world leaders think about that raid on Venezuela?
Keir Starmer, I think not two hoots, perhaps half a hoot at best. Other world leaders, yes. I mean, he would, he probably cares a little bit about what other world leaders are saying, but not really. No, this is a clear assertion of American power. And I think it's defiant so far. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday, very defiant about what America intends to do in that region. And it won't necessarily just apply to Venezuela. It could be Cuba, it could be Colombia, it could be Mexico.
Well, and Denmark apparently on the list, and we've seen senior figure's wife, Stephen Miller's wife, posting, next, with the US flag over the whole of Greenland. Now, that, just going on to that specifically, that kind of puts the cat among the pigeons because, of course, Greenland is basically, run by Denmark. It's a Danish territory. And that then brings things rather closer to home to European leaders, does it not? What do you make of Donald Trump's claim that, Denmark is on the list as well as Colombia? Colombia, again, another basket case country, clear drug running problem. You can argue American sphere of influence. Denmark, obviously, very close to home in the North Atlantic. However, nevertheless, a European territory.
Well, yes, I think it's worth remembering that 2025 started with Donald Trump talking about Greenland and the possible annexation of Greenland. So he does like to start the year with all this talk of very dynamic action. It sets the cat among the pigeons, as it were. But I think certainly America is serious about Greenland. How it will manage to do it is another question. And on Stephen Miller, it's very, very interesting that his wife published that picture of, Greenland with the US flag all over it. Because he apparently is being lined up as a potential figure to be involved in running Venezuela. So he's not really generally thought of as a foreign policy figure, but he was behind Trump on his first press conference after the Venezuela attack. Yeah. He's obviously emerging as someone who's very important in this. And one of his big concerns, of course, is immigration, which is part of this whole, there's lots of people talk about oil, they talk about drugs, they talk about communism. But immigration is a key part of everything that America is doing south of its border.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And you mentioned all those three key issues. And again, some 3 million, I think, of the 8 million Venezuelans who have fled that country in the last few years have gone to America. And that is a concern. It's a big concern in Colombia as well, where a lot of people are there and putting a lot of pressure on public services there. I mean, as we see, in every country where you see a massive wave of refugees. Which of those factors, the oil issue, the drugs issue, the immigration issue, I suppose also adding in just the general, the influence of America's enemies, the Russia's, the Chinese and others. Which of those issues do you think was number one in Donald Trump's mind, regardless of what he says publicly? What was number one in his mind when he decided to agree to that launch, that launch of that raid?
Well, I think in the last 24 hours, it's become a bit fashionable to say it's not actually about the oil. Yeah. But I think that's naive. Obviously, oil is a very important part of the equation in Trump's mind. That's why he mentioned it very early on in his first big statement about Venezuela. He is obsessed with energy prices. He's obsessed with resources. Every single foreign action that has been taken, even before he was president, he's always talked about oil. So, yes, I think oil is a key factor. Drugs are another key factor. America is very concerned about large levels of fentanyl and cocaine coming into United States. So those are both factors. I don't think it's really possible to just single out one factor. There's lots of things going on here. And there's lots of differing visions even within the Trump administration. You have a more neoconservative faction who are interested in democracy building in Latin America. Marco Rubio, although not conventional neocon anymore, certainly was one. And I think he still talks about human rights in Latin America quite a lot. So you have that. You also have this hemispheric dominance, which a lot of people are talking about now, this reversion to a kind of great power world. J.D. Vance tweeting about this is how great powers behave yesterday. We are seeing a different world order emerging. I think that's undoubtedly true.
Yeah, it is extraordinary that press conference Donald Trump gave, and Pete Hegseth is a defense secretary or war secretary, whatever he is these days, and Marco Rubio, his secretary of state, being really open of, even saying, effed around, found out, and the White House putting out some extraordinary videos as well, but making this point. There's a whole it's a kind of Wild West sort of aspect to it. What do you make of the international, I wouldn't say it so far as outcry, I think a lot of people kind of get it, but the usual suspects, whether it's some, European leaders, whether it is, Russia and China obviously expressing concern, whether it is the usual suspects on Labour backbenches, including, Emily Thornberry, now chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, talking about how this attack on the world order and, trashing of international law. What do you make of those criticisms of this venture?
Well, I think a lot of it is cant, really. I think, do Labour MPs really want to be on the side of defending Maduro and the Venezuelan regime?
They were loving him a little while ago, weren't they? I mean, they went a bit quiet. They went a bit quiet on Maduro when as the economy became more and more of a basket case and people were eating their own pets. But otherwise, they're big fans.
Well, I think in the next few weeks, we're going to see quite a few stories about how terrible Venezuela was under Maduro, and probably still is going to be, despite a change in leadership. But no, I think the international reaction, talk of international law, is mostly cant because people just say it when somebody they disagree with does something they disagree with. Also Thornberry started talking about Ukraine. I mean, saying this is going to give Putin the sort of green light to think he can take Ukraine. Do we really want to be comparing Ukraine to Venezuela? I think probably not.
But also this idea that, the Chinese won't act in seizing Taiwan, or Putin wouldn't act in seizing Ukraine, which he already did long before this, because of what Donald Trump has done. Sam Armstrong, my guest, was saying, I'm sure you know well, was talking about, this is that kind of return to the old world order. I mean, at the end of the day, it's power that talks. It's military might that talks. And if you're a big country like America, or, let's face it, like China, you can pretty much do whatever the hell you want and not much can be done about it.
Well, that's certainly true. And I think the China element is very, very interesting. I mean, America is clear that it doesn't want China to be involved in Latin America. It's asserting
which it very much is under the Belt and Road policy.
Well, and there's also another interesting dynamic that I think has been underexplored so far, which is that China had sort of backed away a little bit from Venezuela. Yes, they had this meeting between the Chinese Latin America envoy and Maduro hours before he was captured. But really, they had stopped providing arms to China in recent months because of some change in policy. And is it possible that there's some sort of agreement being in the offing between China and America over Taiwan? You know, you can assert yourself there, while we assert ourselves here. I don't think that's impossible.
That would be very scary days. But I mean, but that's the thing, isn't it? We don't know what is going on behind the scenes, and Donald Trump is all his unpredictability is part of the worry about him, but also one of his strengths as well. Just one final question to you before I let you go: there was a lot of talk on the Saturday when Maduro was, it was announced he'd been captured, that actually he'd done a deal, and the fact that it'd been relatively bloodless, this sort of seizure of him, not for his immediate armed guard, obviously, but that a deal had been done, and basically he'll be whisked away. He'll go and take his many, many, many billions that he's stolen from the Venezuelan people and made from drug running, and he will disappear off onto his nice Caribbean island. It looks much less likely that is the case now.
I think that is much less likely. I think there was probably an option for him to do that, and he didn't take it. And that's why he is where he is now.
Yeah.
But I think there are certainly big maneuvers going on behind the scenes. A lot of talk between Washington and Moscow in recent months. This is obviously a big defeat for Russia and China in Latin America at one level. But is it part of some bigger realignment? Is it part of a peace deal over Ukraine? I think that's going to be the really interesting to watch out for in the next few weeks and months.
It is going to be absolutely fascinating. Lovely to speak to you, Freddie Gray, Deputy Editor and US Editor of The Spectator. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sam Armstrong, it is fascinating how much this story has permutations. It's not just about what's happening in South America or America. This has permutations across the whole world in terms of, the big boys, the big power players are playing big power games.
Let's just play this out a minute. Let's say that the rules-based order is broadly collapsing, and we are seeing a world in which over the next 20 years or so, the big boys do decide to take little bits of territory where they wish to, etc. Perhaps the US takes back dominant control over Colombia and Venezuela, maybe even Cuba. In exchange, Russia perhaps is allowed to take the parts of Ukraine that it wants, and China in its own area, as I say, it already has done that to some extent with the South China Sea. But the big question is this: where does that leave Europe? Yeah. Because we are
utterly irrelevant, I would say.
At present, well, you say that, but the Russia thing is interesting because Russia has the same economy as Spain, basically. It likes to see itself as a big power, throws its weight around as if it is one. It isn't. It ain't. And if it had a military, it has been very, very much deteriorated and degraded by the war in Ukraine. So Europe still has the capacity would win a war against Russia if you took the nuclear picture out of it. It has the capacity to do something, but at present it looks like it's going to be this kind of quaint little pocket of the world in which nothing really happens. Its economy is getting...
But again, and the key thing here is you have to be both able and willing. Well, able and willing.
And as Stephen Miller, who's Freddie brought up, who's the President's Deputy Chief of Staff, brings up, migration also feeds into this, of course, which is, after the Second World War, we basically decided to hand over a load of aid to our former colonies and then allow vast numbers of people from those colonies to come into the UK. And, that comes at a time when Brits that are able, that are gifted, that are talented, are fleeing en masse to precisely the kind of countries that are playing this new great power politics, the UAE, the US, few other places. And you can see a situation in which Europe's decline speeds up very, very much. And this just is the beginning of the end.
We should definitely get ourselves more closely aligned with Europe and the European economy then, should we not? That would absolutely be it's certainly what Keir Starmer wants to do. Seems to me an absolute recipe for even more economic disaster for us.
Ghost of Christmas past.
Absolutely. We've got so much more to talk about. Going to get your calls on air. Get your number. Get that number dialed. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Just some breaking news for you. 10 people have been found guilty of cyberbullying Brigitte Macron, the wife of the French president, over those claims that she isn't a woman at all and she's actually her brother and was born a man. And that has been basically thrown out by the courts, and 10 people have been found guilty. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk with Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Plenty of common sense, as always, from our Monday morning guest, Sam Armstrong, and plenty coming from you, I'm hoping, on the phone lines, 0344 499 1000. It's the number to call. Simple question: was Donald Trump right or wrong to launch a military raid to arrest the Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife? They're going to be in court about 5 o'clock in a Manhattan court later today, 5 o'clock UK time. I want to know why you think it was right, why you think it was wrong. Do you get in touch? 0344 499 1000. Let's go straight to Andrew, who's in Hertfordshire. A very good morning and Happy New Year to you, Andrew.
Happy New Year, Julia.
You're sounding very chirpy.
Oh, yeah, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. We've got the sunshine coming out. Starmer's going in exactly the same direction. A man who, if he fell in a barrel of bosoms, he'd come out sucking his thumb.
Oh, good Lord, I didn't know where that was going. Scared the living daylights out of me. What do you reckon on this? Was Donald Trump right or wrong? Are you with Emily Thornberry or are you with, I don't know, Marco Rubio?
No, Emily Thornberry, never was anybody more pathetic than her. Remember what she said about a man who's going out every morning to earn a living. Trump's right because Blair and Bush were wrong. They've thought this through. Take the top man out, leave all the infrastructure. What's left? And there's a great book that you should read, which is called The Choke Points, which is by Edward Fisherman.
Yeah. Financially
now, they can control that government. So you either play ball or we shut you off.
And they've been very clear about that, because when the vice president, who was sworn in as president with the support of the military, they apparently made some statements being a bit sort of gung-ho. Message came back very clearly: you'll do as you're darn well told, or you're out too.
And they now know that you end up in New York. And if you look at the rest of America, America's fought across the world and caused problems. Colombia and Mexico are the problems. And Trump is going to sort that out, and that ends immigration because there's no reason to leave those countries. Yeah. And what's Starmer doing? He's about to give China, the enemy of the world, a huge embassy in the middle of the country. Trump is good because he's focusing on what matters, the security of America.
Well, that's the point that Sam made as well earlier. And again, that is his job. It's not his job to worry about the niceties. I mean, what about any concerns that are being raised about, international world order and the message that goes to every, any dodgy leader, any dictator around the world, whether it's Russia or China, that you can do whatever you want because so can America. If we don't criticise America for doing this, entering a sovereign territory with his troops, then how can we criticise Putin or Xi Jinping or anyone else if they do the same?
By following the rules, and Sam mentioned really well, how many people have been tortured in Venezuela, Colombia or Mexico? Yeah. So we followed the rules. There comes a point, line in the sand, when you have to reset, and all Trump's doing is he's resetting. There'll be no cocaine coming out of Colombia because the leaders will be in New York and he will kill the cartels.
Yeah, I mean, again, the urge, you cut off the head of that snake, another head will grow very, very quickly. There's no question at all. There is so much money in the international drug trade that they will keep on coming. But when it's actually being basically run by, a supposedly democratically elected leader of a country, I think that's where one can say you draw the line. There's no doubt at all about that. Andrew, thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. Better analysis, I'd like to say, than what I've seen on the BBC this weekend. That's for darn sure. Derek's on the line in Manchester. Hello, Derek. Good morning to you.
Hello, Julia. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Have you got snow? My in-laws are a bit further south than you. They've been snowed in.
Well, we've got a little bit of it, not a great deal.
He's probably now. Can I say you're a northern lad? So my guess is you got 4 foot, but you don't make a fuss. We get a little sprinkling down south. We all have to stay home.
Well, exactly. And we're even worse in the country as a whole. You go to places like Canada, they've got it 6 foot deep, and they're still got to work.
Yeah, exactly. Derek, what do you want to say about Trump then?
Yeah, I mean, he was absolutely spot on. I mean, you can't fault what he's done because at the end of the day, he's only doing what he told everyone he was going to do before he got elected, which was looking after the American people. And if you've got someone that's destroying your country by flooding the place with drugs, and he's hardly likely to extradite himself, is he? So what are you going to do?
That said, Donald Trump keeps claiming that, Venezuela is responsible for most of the drugs. Actually, most of the drugs are coming out of Colombia. Yeah. They're trafficking them. But actually, only about 20% of the drugs, still a huge amount.
Well, 20% is still a huge amount, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, it's like at least Donald Trump is doing what he said he was going to do, which was looking after the American people. And even if it's the oil companies that were ripped off by Venezuela years ago, I mean, they've got court judgments to say that they owe them the money.
Yeah, so, I mean, they literally, that's the thing people realise, this was a functioning, effectively Western state, and the socialist government got elected in. It wasn't a coup. They basically just literally stole those assets.
But the other thing to remember is Donald Trump said he was going to look after the American people. That's exactly what he's doing in every regard. Now, if we had someone in this country that was looking after the British people, would we not be saying to France, would we not be threatening France with a similar thing? Because they're undermining our country by pushing immigrants into this country. And at the end of the day, they're trying to now blame Brexit. What a load of rubbish that is. At the end of the day, most of the traitors we've got in Parliament did not want Brexit. How else do you punish the people other than allowing floods and floods of migrants to come here and then saying, oh, look, you voted, you were trying to stop this, but look what's happened. Yeah. Suddenly they've all entered the country. Yeah. They weren't entering the country on boats. No,
they were coming by lorries. They were just coming through a different route. But but again, there's the idea that we can't stop this. The idea after what Donald Trump did in the border with Mexico, literally done and dusted. The idea that we can't stop this. I must ask you just finally, Keir Starmer's been doing his latest, Monday morning reset to try and make us all think that he's not the worst Prime Minister ever known to the history of this country. But it's about cost of living.
No, you're going to ask me about diversity, are you?
Yeah, well, diversity. This country, if the British values are all about diversity. I mean, what a load of abject nonsense.
Diversity, the word gives it away a little bit. It's a derision of division, isn't it? Division. How can division and diversity possibly make you a better place? Because unification is more what makes you a better country.
People all agreeing on what they want their country to be. He says he's still going to be Prime Minister this time next year. He's also being accused of a Brexit betrayal. What do you make of both those claims?
I really couldn't care less, if he's Prime Minister next year. What bothers me more is if the Labour Party are still in power next year, because he got in on an absolutely false. They lied on the CV basically, just like the Chancellor did. They lied on the CV. They told us what they were going to do and then went to go. Now, to me, we should be changing the law in this country. Whoever comes in next should make us a pledge to this country that they will make politicians be held accountable for their actions, because any other job in this country, you are held accountable. If you say something wrong on radio, you're going to be held accountable. If I do something wrong in my daily work, I'm going to be held accountable. A policeman arrests the wrong person, he's held accountable. Politicians, they just go and sit on the opposite benches and get paid virtually the same.
And civil servants as well. Yeah, the people who are basically running the country, the only people who are not accountable. Well, one of the reasons I voted for Brexit, the main reason was I wanted accountable government of this country. Derek, such a great call. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Sam Armstrong covered a lot of ground there. I mean, Derek, positive about the country, but angry about the way we're being ruled. Really telling.
Yeah, and just compare and contrast our Prime Minister, who cannot seem to do anything, and in some ways it's kind of like he wants to do some of this stuff. He's kind of like, oh, I really need to do some of this stuff, otherwise I'm going to lose this job.
He's moaned at the liaison committee before Christmas, didn't he? You can't really get any. You pull a lever and nothing happens. Which,
of course, he derided before he got in there. Yeah. But like everyone, he's kind of got in there, and found that that's right. Compare and contrast that with Donald Trump, who he wants to do something. He jolly well goes and does it. He just goes and does it. And the world is going to split itself into countries that are prepared to do what it takes and countries that are just going to...
The Argentinas, the Americas...
Fiddle around and just play around with things.
Yeah.
They're going to grow. We're going to go into decline. I despair for the future of our country because I really, really fear that we are standing on the precipice of proper civilisational collapse.
Yeah. And we've got a government currently in power who think that the future is Europe when Europe is absolutely the past, no question at all. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that as well. 10:43 is the time and the number to call 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to talk about Keir Starmer's latest reset. 26 apparently is the year we're going to be turning a corner. That's what he's just said this morning. Good luck, everybody. I mean, what are we going to turn the corner? What are we going to come in? We're going to come against a dead end is when we turn that corner, aren't we? We're also going to be talking about the accusation that we've got latest Brexit betrayal from, let's face it, the Ramona-in-chief known as Keir Starmer. That's up next. This is Talk.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great, but the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:46 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to remind you of that breaking news in the last half an hour or so. 10 people have been found guilty in a French court of cyberbullying the French president's wife, First Lady Brigitte Macron. They'd claimed that she was a trans woman, i.e. a man, and is 8 men and 2 women. They were accused of posting numerous particularly degrading, insulting and malicious comments about her gender and her sexuality. And basically they have been found guilty. We'll wait and see what they are facing. But, I've just realised, they have actually facing 8 months suspended prison sentence, some of them. Others were told that their comments were intended as humour. They told the court their comments were intended as humour or satire, and they didn't understand why they were being prosecuted. But it turns out Brigitte Macron did not see it the same way. Anyway, let's turn our attention to not just the leader of France, but the leader of this country, Keir Starmer. He's been doing his, 587th reset of his premiership with a New Year address to activists. He's in Berkshire. The live stream of his address to Labour Party members was cut off within seconds. Usual chaos with Labour. And basically, we found out what he's saying. Basically, he says that 2026 is a year that we're going to be turning a corner where, when we say we want national renewal of the country, and we do, it becomes a reality, and people begin to feel the difference in their pockets and the ability to pay the bills. Well, let's talk about this and talk of a Brexit betrayal with my next guest, former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards. Good morning and Happy New Year to you, Paul.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's start with what Keir Starmer's had to say today, because this reset is all about, apparently, it's about the cost of living, because everyone knows we're in a cost of living crisis still. Yeah, energy bills have come down, mortgage interest rates coming down, but people are still seeing, basically their pay packets are not going as far as they used to go. He's basically saying, wages are going up, although it's largely more in the public sector than in the private sector, and people will be seeing, things getting better over this year. Is that just pie in the sky nonsense?
I don't think it's nonsense. I think some people are starting to see some increases from very long decades of flatlining wages. I mean, the cost of living is obviously a massive issue, which is absolutely right that he should be talking about it amidst all of the big international stories. We do still have to focus on the bread and butter. I was knocking on doors in Eastbourne yesterday, and Venezuela came up exactly zero number of times. Fly tipping came up quite a lot. Potholes came up.
Bins, bins. You know me, I've got an obsession with bins, the bin collections.
Absolutely, it did come up actually. And so, people are concerned, especially now, post-Christmas, with the bills, which is why he's talking about it. It's a shame that the live feed has gone down, of course, because we don't know what he's actually saying. I think a man with a tweed jacket and a cigarette was seen running from the scene with a pair of pliers.
No, I don't think Nigel Farage ever has to worry about Keir Starmer speaking. Every time Keir Starmer speaks, I think he just boosts reform in the polls. I was watching, come back from the Holes. OK, I've got jet lag as an excuse, 7-hour time difference, but still, from where I've been, it took me 3 sittings to get through that Keir Starmer interview, Laura Kunsberg, because I kept dozing off, because it's just so boring. And he's so unbelievably unconvincing on every topic. And this is the issue, isn't it? The public don't like him. They don't trust him. They want him gone. But they're just not really sure, same as a lot of Labour backbenchers, of who they get in return. Because realistically, it looks like Ed Miliband would be the alternative.
Well, that's exactly the point, isn't it? You have to be very careful what you wish for. And what the Tories taught us over all those years was that if you swap your leader and hope that suddenly everything's going to dramatically change and people will feel a difference, it doesn't work, and you don't necessarily get the candidate you want to do in the first place. I mean, for the Labour Party, of course, it's very hard to do this. The Tories could do it with great alacrity and regularity, but Labour has a constitution built in against this idea of swapping leaders all the time. So it's a hard thing to do. But Starmer's point is, I think, a good one, which is that you need a grown-up in charge. He may not be the man that we would want to celebrate New Year's Eve with and pop champagne and go dancing with, but on the other hand, and he also, I know it drives people up the pole too when he's sort of slow and deliberative and lawyerly and weighs up evidence. But I think in this mad world we need people like that do just look at what's going on and not just tweet from the hip, but actually look and see what's going on. So when he gives his interviews and it sounds a bit on the one hand and a bit on the other, I kind of welcome that. I think someone weighing up evidence and listening to what's going on, dialing into other world leaders, taking his time in a fast-moving situation, probably the right approach, isn't it?
Except I think most people interpret it as I do, which is actually him sitting on the fence and dithering and not really knowing. I interpret it not as, he's a really thoughtful man. I interpret it as someone who's A, boring as hell, and B, someone who has no drive, no vision, no philosophy of life. That's how I interpret it.
Well, and yet he got selected to be a member of Parliament and then elected as a member of Parliament, and then he got himself elected as the leader of the Labour Party, and then he became Prime Minister.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people would argue that he told lies. He told lies for certainly the last two. He sold himself as a man of the left of the Labour Party in 2020. He sold himself as a man sort of more on the right, and would, these are things he was going to get done to the country at large last year. or the year before
According to
last.
you, they're all liars, but he somehow has managed to use his political skills to get to where he's got, which is the top job in our system, which many others have wanted and very few have ever got. So he's obviously doing something right.
Well,
and
you
he
see,
has
he's
skills.
doing something right. He's not
the
very
Prime
good at.
Minister.
This is something he said. He put this in a tweet. I think it's similar to the words he used to Laura Kunsberg yesterday. He said, "We need to shoot down this idea that slogans, easy answers, quick fixes, and shortcuts are what will fix this country." But actually, that's all he does. Smash the gangs. Well, he hasn't smashed the gangs. We've seen boat migrant numbers going up by a huge percentage under Labour. He thought that you could just have a nice chat with Macron and with the Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels, and then you could sort the problem out. Oh, what a surprise! You couldn't. He thought that as soon as Labour were in power, the civil servants would start doing what they were sodding well told to do by the elected representatives of the people. Turns out they're not doing that either. He's backtracked on virtually every major policy, like whether it's welfare reform, whether it's on changes to things like who could be eligible for winter fuel allowance. He's partly backtracked on farmers' inheritance tax. I mean, the man hasn't got a moral fibre in his body.
Well, doesn't that make the point, though, that you can't just come in with slogans and say things and things happen overnight?
But that's exactly what he did.
So, for example, the trade deals, which he's citing today, he's talking about the world-class deals we've got with India, Europe, and the States. Now, those are slow burn things that will pay off over the rest of this Parliament, and people will see the benefits from. It's not a slogan. It's actually a hard negotiation that has led to boosts for British companies and jobs. But it won't happen tomorrow. It will happen over time. And the same with the policies like investing in the housing or the rail fares or whatever it is. These are things that we'll notice, but over time, because in real politics you can't do stuff overnight. And if you could, we would all be doing it, wouldn't we? If we could fix problems overnight, we would do it. So it is about hard yards.
But again, he's concerned about rail prices as he puts up a cost for people driving. I mean, most people don't get a train from one year to the next. This is so much a North London, middle-class man worrying about his concerns. I'm surprised he's not said we'll have a deduction on villas in Tuscany.
I think freezing the rail
hummus
fares
for everyone.
Freezing, nothing wrong with that. Do you know what I got for Christmas, by the way, Julia? From my kids was a tub of hummus.
You're kidding
So there
me.
you go. Talk
Wow.
about the cost of living crisis.
Wow, that is but it was fancy hummus though.
It was reasonably fancy. But anyway, for freezing the rail fares, a lot of people do commute on the train.
Most people don't. Most people don't get a train
Most people don't.
from one year to the next.
But if you have to do good, you do it by inches, don't you? And so this is another
help drivers.
step forward that will help people.
Okay.
And
Right. Well, talking of helping people, will it help Keir Starmer if he does actually go ahead with what many fear will be a Brexit betrayal, basically taking us much closer to realignment with the single market, pretty much back in a customs union. He may not say he's doing it, but let's face it, all of the realignment, he's realigning, whether it's on agriculture, whether it's on food, on this rule and that rule, whether it's on energy, whether it's on net zero, basically gradually, sneakily taking us back into the European orbit. And we know what's going to come next. Well, we may as well just rejoin, shouldn't we?
Well, I think in this divided world where the rules order seems to be broken up and God knows what's happening with Taiwan and Colombia and God knows where else, I think closer cooperation with the EU is a good idea for the UK. Now, that's not the same as rejoining the EU or going full feet into the customs union, but I think just having greater trade, more alignment, getting our lawyers and architects being able to work in Europe, the Erasmus scheme, which means kids can go and study abroad. These things are just sensible for us so that we're not isolated. We're not alone.
We're not isolated. We had a scheme that replaced the Erasmus scheme, and British kids were able to go and study around the world rather than Europe. More of them wanted to study outside Europe than inside Europe. What does that tell you?
I think the Erasmus scheme is. I mean, I can't think anyone that's opposed to that idea. It's a perfectly sensible bit of.
I'm absolutely opposed to subsidising middle-class kids getting a gap year.
Well, I don't think that's what it is. It's about.
I think that is what it is. I know people who've done it and they've done absolutely sod all work, and we pay for it.
well, it should be better held to account then, shouldn't it? But the idea of young people studying abroad is a good thing.
No, but it's I see kids coming from Europe as well, and this is the thing. But this is the thing.
What's wrong with that? You'd have to be pretty ideologically opposed to anything European to stop kids studying.
No, absolutely. I don't know why it needs to be subsidised by. And we know that the cost will end up being in the billions because we're on a starter cost. You know as well as I do, the EU are taking the mick out of us. They're charging us a fortune for anything to have more involvement because they know Keir Starmer is literally dribbling on his knees, desperate to get back in. And what's going to happen is eventually there'll be pressure from the Greens, the Lib Dems, and from Labour, and let's face it, large sections of the Conservative Party as well, say we may as well rejoin. Now, do you think that we ever would rejoin, and could we do it without the mandate of an elected government saying in the manifesto we're going to have a vote and then actually another referendum?
Well, that to me is the only way it could happen is constitutionally. I don't see how you could do it in other way. So it's a real hypothetical. It's going to send everyone absolutely nuts, isn't it? But the idea that we rejoin the European Union could only happen, in my view, from a government, as you say, elected on a manifesto pledge to do so, and then a referendum of the people with a 1% victory.
Yeah. Although 50.01% would be enough, wouldn't it, for the remainders? Do you think
that's how it works? But it's not happening, is it? It's not happening.
I don't think it is happening. Do you think? Because I don't think any of that is going to happen. But do you think that the British people? We're told all the polls are saying that British people would rather we hadn't left, would vote to rejoin. I don't believe for a nanosecond the deal that we'd get, including having to take on the euro, we'd have to lose the pound. It would be an absolute requirement. We'd have to join the euro. Do you think that in a month or Sundays the British people would vote for that?
Well, no, and that's why the argument about having closer alignment with the trading bloc that is the EU is the right one, because that just benefits British people without some of the things that they rejected at the referendum last time around. But to ignore Europe completely, and do ourselves is stupid.
All right, Paul, we'll have to leave it there. No one's talking about ignoring Europe. I'm just saying let's not align with everything they do because it's a fading economy. Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor, thank you very much, Steve, for that quick response from Sam Armstrong.
I think before we get all of our guests on air, we should ask them first, when was the last time you ate a tub of hummus?
No, fancy hummus.
Fancy hummus.
I've never been a big fan of hummus.
It's a good test, actually.
I love that. That is, as Christmas presents go, to be fair, I don't think... Did I even get a present from my kid at Christmas? I'm not sure I did. Anyway, lots more to talk about. Do send in your hummus gifts at any time. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning and a big welcome back to the show. Happy New Year to you. If you're just tuning in, this is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you as always for your company. Great to have you join us. I don't know whether it's snowing where you are. We've got beautiful blue skies down here in London, but tell us know how you're coping. Also, I'd love to know what you got for Christmas, because one of our guests apparently got some fancy hummus from his kids for Christmas. If you can top that as the worst gift ever, I would love to hear from you. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. Get in touch at talkTV on X. Don't forget, of course, those calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Don't forget also, if you miss anything from the show, the last hour, or you're going to, I don't know, maybe have to go out and have a life, I don't know, get the snow off the car, you can go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more, of course, about the ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. He's going to appear alongside his wife in a New York court later today, about 5 p.m. UK time. He's facing charges of narco-terrorism, conspiracy and cocaine trafficking. He was seized by US forces on Saturday after Donald Trump authorised a raid by those special forces on the South American country, resulting in the capture of Maduro and his wife. Now, Donald Trump has declared the US will now run the oil-rich country. He hasn't said for how long. Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, she's been sworn in as president to serve as the interim leader. And after she made some sort of, fighting sounds, she was told in no uncertain terms, basically, you're going to do as you're told, sweetheart, or you're going to face a worse fate than Maduro. Meanwhile, Donald Trump not just threatening action in neighbouring Colombia, also another major drug trafficking cartel organisation there, but also he's now setting his sights on the takeover of Greenland, which he says is for defence reasons. That raises a lot of concerns. Of course, Greenland is a Danish territory. You're then dealing with the EU at that point. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. In particular, was Donald Trump right or wrong to launch a military raid to arrest the Venezuelan leader? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Was he right? Was he wrong? Tell us why. Tell us why you think he was, why he wasn't. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. And also, what do you make of Keir Starmer's response? He's refused to describe Trump's actions as a breach of international law. He's basically sitting on the fence, as frankly he's probably wise to do. But he's got growing criticism from, let's face it, the usual suspects on the Labour backbenches. We're also going to be talking about the latest migrant stories. My goodness me, there are plenty of those. Not only Alaa Abdul El Fattah, the British-Egyptian activist who, of course, was basically the number one priority, would appear, for Britain's Foreign Office for much of the last few months to try and get him freed. Yesterday, Keir Starmer said he didn't know that he tweeted all these really rather terrifying things about his hatred of the West, of Jews, and wanting to kill people in the West, particularly Jews. But apparently he doesn't really regret the fact that Britain helped to extricate this man from an Egyptian jail. But also going to talk about migrants having their mobile phones and SIM cards seized by Border Force officers if they arrive on boats as of today. If there are reasonable grounds to suspect there is intelligence that could lead to the prosecution of people smugglers. Surely that is everybody who arrives illegally in this country. But a thing that absolutely astonishes me is it was not already being done. What on earth is our Mickey Mouse Border Force been doing all this time? Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of the big stories. Plenty more to talk about. And joining me throughout the show for all those big stories is commentator Sam Armstrong. Morning once again to you.
Good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Just on that last story, I mean, it is extraordinary. The latest major story they put out, the border sort of minister today from the Home Office to do the rounds. It is a Monday. Going to seize phones from small boat migrants if there might be intel. Why were we not already doing that? You can seize the phone of somebody who wrote a tweet, for goodness sake. How can't you seize the phone of somebody who's arriving illegally? And they're going to be allowed to search their mouths inside to see if they've got SIM cards in there. I mean, are they going up the jacksies as well? Because it would seem to me that would be a good thing to do too.
Well, look, in a sense, pathetic, reasonable. We're starting 2026 much the same way as we spent 2025. Monday morning, government announcing press release saying that they've solved migration this time. But compare and contrast, and I'm going to say this all day today, I'm probably going to say all of this year, compare and contrast our efforts to stop the border to stop illegal crossings on the border with what the United States did.
Ta-da.
The United States did absolutely everything they needed to do all at once, one big go. We said, bang, we are not going to have people crossing into our country illegally anymore. If you do, we are going to detain you for as long as we so choose, and we're going to get you out. No ifs, no buts,
and we're
no
going to
questions.
round up the people who've been here for years.
We're going to do the lot. And the result, the illegal crossings into the United States, one of the biggest movements of people anywhere on earth, stopped on a sixpence.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, Donald Trump entered office, that problem stopped. Our government, constrained by the complete and utter nonsense of this human rights framework, laws, Equality Act, all of this gargantuan Gordian knot, spends its life trying to unpick it and gets absolutely nowhere. And in the meantime, our country every day gets inexorably worse as criminals break into our country, demand the right to stay here at our expense. And frankly, even if it wasn't at our expense, there was pictures out over the weekend of a Albanian burglar who has been convicted and deported from this country twice for being a professional burglar. He's now posting TikToks from luxury clubs in London, nightclubs in London. That is the joke our country has become. Compare and contrast that to what is going on in the United States. They see a problem, they fix it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, and so many people are looking at Donald Trump. I mean, again, you can like him, you can loathe him, I don't care, but he gets the job done, and he was elected on a mandate to do exactly what he's done. And certainly, if Nigel Farage is elected, or whoever, whether it's a choice, who knows what's going on, coalition next time round, if and when we get an election again. I mean, Labour do seem to like cancelling elections, so one does worry that they need to have a clear mandate to do this stuff and to get it done with the support of the British people. Where are you on Donald Trump getting it done when it comes to not happy with what's going on in Venezuela, not happy with 3 million of the 8 million exiles and the refugees who've left Venezuela as it's become a basket case country run by a kleptomaniac, corrupt, violent, dangerous drug cartel leading president in Nicolas Maduro, saying basically, well, we're just going to take you out, we're just going to send in our people, we're going to extract you and send you to court for your crimes. And these crimes, I mean, I'm sorry, it's indisputable that this man is a drug dealing corrupt creature. I mean, he's absolutely awful, and thank God he's out of office now. But actually, just getting the job done, not whinging and moaning about it, not talking about international courts or that, just getting it done. Now, the outcry we've seen from the left and the usual suspects is sort of, the international rules order, you can't do this. You're basically saying it's okay for Putin and Xi Jinping and anyone else to do whatever they want, and now they're going to be emboldened to act as they want. These people will do whatever the hell they want to do anyway. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump decided that this guy was a danger to America, and he dealt, he says it, as he said, he effed around and he found out.
The rules-based international order was, let's be frank, a convenient fiction that allowed us to pretend that the world had all of a sudden become safer, that human beings had stopped wanting to invade places and to take over countries and to have little empires. The reality is this: the only thing that stops a bad guy with an army is a good guy with a bigger army. And the United States has secured the West for 40, 50, 60, 70, even 80 years, basically, by just being the biggest force out there. The world is changing. And Donald Trump has shown that as this new reality asserts itself, he is prepared to do what it takes to keep the American people safe. And at the end of the day, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I'm a Brit. What he does is frankly, it's not a matter for me to judge. It's irrelevant to me. The people who voted him in are Americans that do live in parts of the country that have been ravaged, absolutely ravaged by illegal drugs, illegal migrations, both of which Maduro was sending their way. It was a problem for him, so he went and sorted it.
He dealt with the source of the problem. I mean, but it is interesting, isn't it? Because we often talk about dealing with the source of the problem of, say, illegal migrants in this country. We need to help, build better nation states in Africa and the Far East.
How's that going?
Yeah, exactly. That's not our job. And as we've discovered in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, you actually can't impose democracy on these places. And the difference about Venezuela is Venezuela was a thriving, rich democracy. Back in the 70s, it was one of the wealthiest countries per capita in the world because of its oil resources. And they have just been absolutely, plundered and stolen. But what is extraordinary is how little of their oil reserves, the biggest oil reserves in the world, 70% of all oil reserves, known oil reserves in the world, are in Venezuelan territory. They're pumping like 1 million barrels a day, like nothing compared to countries like Saudi Arabia. We've got far less oil.
But they should be like the sheikhs of Saudi Arabia, right? Like the best evidence you've ever got that socialism doesn't work is Venezuela. That you should be having 4 or 5 English Premier League football teams owned by Venezuelan businessmen.
And not. Well, we're going to be talking to a brilliant guest at midday, actually. He's a Venezuelan exile, one of the many, and talking about, what Maduro did to the country. It is absolutely infuriating to me, all the coverage over the weekend, especially from the mainstream media, about they just basically just skirt over Maduro's crimes within his country, and not just the economic crimes, the theft of people's personal property. He wasn't just stealing, multi-billion pound, oil corporations and then running them into the ground. They literally basically stopped production. He would literally just steal people's farms, people's homes. They would just say, no, we own that shop now, you don't own it, even something you've built up as your own business for years. People living hand to mouth, people literally having to eat their own pets. Because they were so hungry in a South American country that was only sort of 10 years, 20 years earlier, or the richest in the world. That is down to socialism, and not even just corruption and drug running, because there's corruption and drug running, frankly, in the whole of that South American area, and the people are not living in the same level of destitution. So we're going to talk about what he's actually done. But this man is an absolute criminal. Absolutely, really glad he's gone. What do you make of all the usual suspects, the Richard Bergens, the Jeremy Corbyns, Emily Thornberry, who's, to be fair, got a proper job, chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, when she didn't get any jobs in cabinet because everyone realised how bleeding awful she was. She thought she was big mates with Starmer and was absolutely outraged not to get the job she thought she was due. But they're all doing the usual stuff, saying, you talk about the international rules-based order and how this was a terrible thing, and how Keir Starmer needs to stop sitting on the fence and he needs to condemn. He needs to condemn what Donald Trump did.
I split that group of people into two halves, the deluded and the disingenuous. The deluded are those like Emily Thornberry, which, let's be clear, Emily has never been the brightest bulb in the chandelier, as it would be for her. Look, she believes that this rules-based international order it exists and it can be maintained. She's wrong, but she's not necessarily malicious about it. Richard Bergens, your Absana Begums, this group of people are part of a very well-organised leftist international movement that funds itself, it's very closely coordinated and directed, that never fails to identify an enemy of Britain, of America, and not sympathise with them. These are the same people that are urging caution in Iran. These are the same people that are pushing China's interests. These are the same people that are backing Hamas, that backed Hezbollah. This is a well-organised movement that is often funded by the Chinese Communist Party, forces in Russia that are just determined to stir up chaos, that whenever something happens are always calling on the West to not do what it needs to do to protect itself.
I saw a brilliant photo that someone mocked up on Tinterweb yesterday, where it was a big outside in a crowd and a big stall saying, exchange your Palestinian flags for Venezuelan flags here, and that is totally true. It's like, what's the next big cause? Remarkably quiet though around the Iranian protesters, and we've seen the Iranian government has started to basically, shoot, and we're talking about, pellets, basically shooting protesters in the eye. They're blinding people. This apparently is a known sort of policy, the Iranian government dealing with the protesters, basically just seeking to go back to some semblance of a normal life. And again, another basket case economy and horrific, Islamist rule. And it is just extraordinary how quiet all these people are who care desperately about people in Gaza, but really not that bothered about people being subjugated in Iran.
Yeah, and actually what really strikes me is that both Iran and Venezuela were once upon a time the absolute jewels of their respective regions.
Yeah.
Persia, as it was under the Shah, which, don't get me wrong, number of problems, but broadly speaking, one of the most prosperous, one of the better governed parts of that region, and Venezuela, which was on its way to being being the real jewel, possibly wealthier than the United Kingdom.
We would be talking about emigrating there, you know, to have a better life.
Can you imagine Venezuela if it had been properly run? Yeah. There would be so much money. Christian country, can drink as much as you like, beaches
great
all
weather.
up the Gulf of America as it is now.
I mean,
jungle, rainforest.
I'm there.
Oh, it would have been fabulous. But these are two countries that have been ruined by the twin evils of our time. Socialism, the red, and Islamism, the green. And wherever these two ideas touch, countries are destroyed overnight. And the sooner we can wake up to that and just deal with these countries, deal with these ideas as the hideous snakes and problems that they are, the better.
This is one of the issues, a particular socialism issue, in how much you've got to do the new New York mayor being elected. We've got, I mean, again, you look at what's happening in Europe, parties are moving to the right, but there's also voters moving to the left as well. I mean, certainly in France, everyone's on the far left or the far right, pretty much. But we see here, you know, the move towards sort of people thinking that socialism is a good idea, socialism is the answer. And with the cost of living crisis that we are seeing across the Western world, you can understand why people say, well, something's not right. That person over there is a billionaire getting loads of money and I haven't got enough money. People can't get a job. Keir Starmer today is doing his latest reset. I mean, again, 50 millionth, I don't know, I lose track. This is about the cost of living. He's basically saying we're turning a corner and in 2026 people are going to start feeling better off. Now, we've seen the latest figures. You know, we know unemployment is rising to EU-style levels because, interest rates are down. Well, that's got sod all to do with the government. That's the Bank of England. And they're still too high for a lot of people coming off those fixed-rate mortgages. We know that with the minimum wage and national insurance rises have absolutely stymied the chances of lots of young people getting on the ladder to get a job. So we've got unemployment going up. We've got, house prices are still, they ain't going down, so people can afford to buy homes. There's no question at all. You go to the supermarket, your money does not go as far as it used to go. People are feeling the pinch. People's savings have been gradually depleting. If they're lucky enough to have savings, a lot of that money is gone. Energy bills are still absolutely sky high. People can see it, and he's saying it's all going to get better. It's not going to get. There's nothing that Labour has done in the last two budgets, any other policies they're talking about, that would in any way suggest that things would get better.
I was told about a senior British politician who sat down with one of the wealthiest men in America, and the wealthiest man in America just turned to him the other day and he said, describe in less than 1 minute what the UK's industrial or economic strategy is for the next 30 years. And that politician was just silent and he laughed. He said, look, you don't have an economic strategy. There isn't an economic plan. There is no ideas. There's no progress being made. The UK economy is in relative, as in compared to other countries, total and absolute irreversible decline.
But one of the main reasons for that is energy costs, because you can't manufacture, you can't make anything. And also, by the way, we can't have a future in AI, which the Prime Minister is convinced we're going to do, without plentiful, cheap energy. And again, this is one of the reasons...
But be specific, Julia. Energy costs, what are they? Energy, it is not just that the fact that gas and oil are more expensive than they have been, though they are. It is the fact that when you pay for your energy at home, you are paying 5% VAT. You're paying hundreds of pounds to allow Ed Miliband to go and open up new wind farms. You're paying for the fact that wind farms cost a load more to make energy. It is very specific policies that were decided by successive governments, Labour and Conservative, that have made it incredibly expensive to do anything.
This ties back in with what Donald Trump has done in Venezuela. Now, America is the biggest oil-producing country in the world. But they want particular kind of heavy crude oil that Venezuela has. They export a lot of their oil. They have more light crude oil. Now, here's the crucial thing, though. But he knows if you want to get ahead of China on AI, you need very cheap energy. What is the main source of energy in the entire world still to this day and will be for the rest of the century? It is fossil fuels like oil and gas. It is just that simple. You cannot have a thriving economy. I mean, again, that's why Europe, the whole of Europe is absolutely... I'm trying to think of a word I can say on air that's louder, but not in a good way. Not in a good way, because the powerhouse economy of Europe is Germany, and they are still completely insane when it comes to the net zero policy. While you still have even a scintilla of interest in net zero, you are not going to be one of the world's leading economies. China, India, lots of other countries, they are going to zoom ahead of us. It's absolute madness. What do you make of this talk about Keir Starmer basically betraying British voters on Brexit, because he's even got some of his red wall seat Labour MPs saying, not on my watch. Pledge was very, very clear, would not try and turn back Brexit, which is, of course, what they were absolutely trying to do in the 2019 general election. And he's sort of saying, no, we just want closer alignment to Europe. There's no doubt at all in my mind, were there to be an attempt to actually take us back into the EU, it could only be done, as we were discussing with our Labour guest Paul Richards a few moments ago, it can only be done with a referendum. And that referendum would only come about if there was a mandate for that referendum. So a party would have to say in their manifesto at the next general election, we are going to hold a referendum on returning to the EU, and then they would have to get the majority, and then they could have the referendum, and then we'd have a vote. There's no doubt at all that the EU we'd lose that Thatcher rebate for a start. They would charge us an absolute fortune to rejoin. The terms would be terrible, but crucially, one of the requirements for new members is categorically nothing to discuss. You have to join the euro. Again, another failing currency. Tied to the economic concerns of Germany rather than the economic concerns of the UK. There is no way in the world the British people would vote for that. They're not crazy. But there's no doubt at all that Labour Party entirely almost now, Liberal Democrats, the Greens, and a large number of Tories as well would love to rejoin the EU. Do you think it'll ever happen?
No, I think what's going to happen is exactly what's going on at the moment, which is they're going to try and get us back in through salami slices. They're going to get us in
without really noticing.
One little bit at a time. And you could see what's going on. And by the way, when we do that, the EU makes us pay even more.
Yeah. But that'll be the argument. Well, we're rule takers, not real makers.
But we're going to get screwed on this, and I don't apologise for using that language, because it's going to cost us enormous amounts of money. It's going to damage businesses when we have to make sacrifices. And what is the industry Keir Starmer is trying to benefit here? It was in the article straight up in what Labour said. It was the legal services industry.
Brilliant.
Literally, Keir Starmer is putting the interests of lawyers in North London ahead of the people across this country that got up this morning, that had to get the kettle out and pour the boiling water over the windscreen to try.
Don't think you should do that. By the way, do not do that, people.
Don't do anything practical that I recommend.
Do not do that.
As a rule. But people who got up early, worked hard to go and work as plumbers and gas fitters and all the rest of it, they are paying because Keir Starmer, himself a North London lawyer, has decided to put the interests of his mates ahead of the people of this country again.
Let's help the middle class professionals more than anyone else. Yeah, exactly. 11:25 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the topics we're talking about, including this reset, Brexit betrayal, but in particular I want to ask you about Donald Trump. Was he right or wrong? Simple as that. Was he right or wrong to launch a military raid to arrest the Venezuelan leader Maduro, who's going to be caught later today? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great. But the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. It's coming up to 11:28. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Getting in touch about Trump and Venezuela, and also that 100 millionth Starmer reset. It goes up every time. Alice is in Bournemouth, wants to have her say on Trump and Venezuela. Good morning to you, Alice.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Do you know what? Actually, really pleased to be back at work because there's so much exciting stuff going on. Do you think Donald Trump was right or wrong then with what he did?
I think Donald Trump was very right, but you've got to keep your eye on him.
That's fair. I thought if you're going to go in, you're going to oust Maduro, then okay, well then say, right, we're going to have an interim government that's going to be the ones who were elected last year, the opposition, the leader who got the Nobel Peace Prize, and then but we're going to insist you hold more elections. I mean, that would seem reasonable, but
actually yes, because Corina won the election, she actually won the election. It was taken away from her. Then she put somebody else to actually go against him. They won the election as well, and also taken away from him. Should have been Maria Corina that actually should be going in, which she's been completely ignored. I also want to say that in 1999, when Chavez, which is the same party as Maduro, that took over from Chavez after he died, I started as a socialist party. This was the Venezuelan Socialist Party, which is what we are so dangerously close to here in the UK at the moment. And look what's happened to Venezuela. They were actually, in the 80s, the fourth strongest economy in the world.
Yeah, as we've been saying, it's being skirted over a lot of this. Actually, there's corruption, there's the drug cartels now, but fundamentally the issue, and, the kleptocratic thing, but the fundamental reason why this country has collapsed and is in the state it's in is because it's been run by a socialist party.
Exactly. It's from a socialist to dictatorship. It started out as socialism, same as Iran. Started out as socialism, now it's a dictatorship, same Venezuela.
But it's like the Soviet Union, it's like China, it's like Cuba. Socialism doesn't exist without dictatorship, because when you're controlling what people do, that ends up having that sort of government. It's not an accident.
There's no free market, there's no freedom. And I can tell you, my husband's from Venezuela. And the families, the things that we've had to do, like, for example, you can't just send a pair of shoes. You have to send one, then the other, because they might be nicked by the post office. I mean, they're that poor there at the moment. And they are one of the richest countries. They have petrol, they have water, they have diamonds, they have gold, they have everything possibly imagined.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. It'd be amazing to see if they can turn that country around. It really would. Alice, I was saying we're all experts on Venezuela now. It sounds like you actually are. I can tell just from the way you were talking about the opposition leaders. Alice, I so appreciate your call. But as far as you're concerned, Donald Trump did the right thing, but got to watch him rather closely. Thank you for that. Talking of which, let's go to Ray, who's in Colchester. Do you feel the same way about Keir Starmer?
Oh, well, as you well know, I love the man Keir Starmer. In fact, it's another reset day, and I've given up on using clocks now. I just decide what day it is purely by the fact that they're announcing another reset, because the last reset went so well, of course.
Well, what phase? Does anyone remember what phase we're in? Because weren't they on phase 2 or phase 3? I lost track.
Well, once again, I mean, literally, in the year or so, which, my God, seems so much longer, of him being into power, literally every promise he made standing before the election was broken. Everything he has said since then has been backtracked, turned around, or sat on the fence, or wouldn't make a decision. Literally, the guy has a complete disassociation with a thing called truth. And the problem is, once you have that, and once people realise that, you can promise everything in the world. You can promise them everything, but they're no longer going to believe you and no longer going to pay a single attention to what you say. And here we are in our umpteenth reset of our great and glorious leadership. And I think we are way beyond that point of listening to them, to be perfectly honest. I'm
with you. My main thing is, I was watching his first big interview with Laura Kunzberg yesterday, and I had to do it in 3 sittings because I kept falling asleep. I mean, he's just an empty vessel. There's nothing in there. There's nothing inside. He's just sort of like a shell of a man.
Well, listen, you're a better woman than I am a man, because I couldn't even face watching him.
I only did it because of work. I only did it because of work.
Is that the caveat that we have to put on these things? I was forced to do it today, yeah. But listen, it's irrelevant now what he says as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
He's now talking about the economy, because you know what?
We're all fine now.
Immigration, which is the biggest thing for people, he isn't going to sort that. He's moved on to the economy, making outlandish and ridiculous things, saying, "Oh no, your gas and electricity is going down, and we're going to give you a rebate."
No, but also,
have more money in your pocket.
Forget gas.
No, it's a lie.
Forget gas. He's gaslighting us. It's like, no, you think you're poorer, but you're not.
It literally is at that point where the true believers will carry on believing him. Unfortunately, those true believers I think consist of the mirror that he's looking into, and that is it.
I love it. Ray, thank you very much indeed. At 11:33 is time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to, well, guess what? A human rights lawyer about whether or not Donald Trump was right or wrong to launch a military raid to arrest the Venezuelan leader, and what should Keir Starmer be doing or saying about it? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:35 is the time. Let's talk more about Donald Trump and that military raid to arrest the Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro. Was he right or was he wrong, Donald Trump, when he launched that raid? Well, let's talk about that with a human rights lawyer. They've always got so much to say on these issues, have they not? John Cooper, KC, joins us. Very good morning to you, John.
I love the way you set me up like that as a human rights lawyer, but I hope not an empty vessel. But let's see.
You tell me, John. I've known you a long time. I know you're not. So look, Maduro's going to appear in court alongside his wife about 5 p.m. UK time, indicted on a number of narco-terrorism, conspiracy and cocaine trafficking charges. I've got no doubt at all he's been caught absolutely banged to rights. There's no doubt at all he's been running a drugs cartel, and that has been an issue for the country and indeed for America. But was Donald Trump right and justified to launch that military raid to arrest him?
Obviously, Julia, that's a big question. If you answer it legally, you might get one answer. If you ask me it morally, you might get another answer. If you ask it me politically, you might get another answer.
Well, give me all three.
Let me give you all three. Well, firstly, obviously I've got no truck with what Maduro's accused of, and this isn't an apology for him. That's the first thing to say. I'm just talking hard facts here. As a matter of law, there are strong arguments to say that he's got it wrong, that to invade like this or intervene like this in such a way, without getting too bogged down with all the articles, it's Article 240 you wanted to know, without getting bogged down with that, if he takes this action without the appropriate reason to do so, that his country is under threat of attack or might be actually under attack, then that's in breach of international law. And it's important just to say where that comes from. That comes from October 1945, when the world was worried about countries taking such steps. steps without good reason. And obviously, by doing that, and I'll come on to the politics and the law in a moment, but in doing that, is set a precedent, as the law always does. When you do one thing, and if you consider it to be legal, then you're setting a precedent for other countries, like, I don't know, China and Taiwan. We can do all the other examples, which no doubt you'll discuss or have discussed. So that's the law, that there's strong arguments to say, as a matter of law, he's got it wrong. And the reasons for it I've just laid out in very short order there as to why it is there, to protect the world from others that might carry on doing it and use it as a precedent, and may well do so in the future. But as a matter of politics, that's another reason. That's another thing to consider. And we're seeing here the exercise of hard power. We're seeing here the reality of how people in strong positions, such as President Trump, may react, will react, and could react in the future, and not just him, against regimes which actually might or might not be causing harm to his country and to the world through
narcotics. Well, we've already got threats to Colombia and to Denmark.
So the bottom line here is, do we as citizens of the world, are we comfortable with having politics usurp the law and say, well, we don't need the law's protection in the future as a world community, and we're happy for strong leaders to effectively take these actions, potentially illegally, on our behalf, and we're comfortable with that, and we're comfortable with the precedent that creates, and that's one point of view that no doubt your listeners and your viewers...
And what about the moral aspect?
Well, the moral aspect of it, one can see that if what is being alleged against Maduro is true, I speak as a lawyer, obviously very carefully, but if what's being alleged against him is true, then of course such activities and the activities of countries that are encouraged by people like him to do this, we're best shot of them. So from a moral aspect and from a hard power political aspect, one can understand why this might be a popular course. But we just need to take a moment as world citizens to consider, whilst we might be celebrating this particular action, what are the precedents that it creates?
I mean, because this is the thing, there's lots of people, particularly on the left, are arguing, look, this is about, you say, it's about the world order, rules-based, international order, and the rights of sovereign states. However, I mean, look, it's a sovereign state, but we're talking about a raid going in to see someone who was wanted on, narcotic trafficking charges by another state. One could argue that then supersedes that issue of international law. But also, crucially, this was a man who was not democratically in power. We seem to have people who are bizarrely on the left who seem to recognise the rights of, whether it's, Saddam Hussein or Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or Nicolas Maduro and others, as somehow having some sort of, a sort of moral rectitude in being in their position as leaders, even though they're simply there by being ruthless dictators who have, basically ignored the will of their own people. At that point, it's a bit of nonsense to talk about this sort of international rules-based order, because they're already ignoring it by torturing their opponents and by ignoring the results of democratic elections.
I think, Julia, it's a nonsense to use that argument, as it were, to justify the behaviour of an individual. Well, and you're not talking to, you know me better, I'm not talking to a bleeding heart over lefty lawyer here. I'm not one of those. But hopefully you speak to someone who sees both sides of an argument from a practical point of view. Now, what you say is absolutely right. And we can think of many examples. For instance, taking it out of the international perspective of us not liking what a particular individual does and us taking steps to stop it. But does that open up a precedent for other people more unscrupulous than us to actually use that law or use that ability to do it against us?
But that assumes that the Putins, the Xi Jinpings, the Kim Jong-uns and others, and the Iranian Ayatollahs, that they give two hoots about this international rules-based order, that they care at all what the United Nations is. I mean, look, these are the same people, by the way, who argued that any action taken by the UN is illegal if Russia and China vetoes it. I don't care two bits what those two countries' leaders think about any policy. I think it's up to democratic nations to decide what they consider to be fit and reasonable action. I mean, do I think it's a good idea for America to be taking out the leaders of neighbouring states? No, probably not. But at the end of the day, the reality is, this whole idea of a rules-based international order is a complete fictitious creation. And actually, the rules-based order is based on who's got the biggest military and the ability and the willingness to use it. And this is about who's the strongest country, who's willing to take action to protect their own spheres of influence, their own resources, their own
and that is absolutely fine. Talking from the perspective of the UK, we're a decent, law-abiding leaders of democracy country. But and I can understand us saying that from our comfortable position. But the international laws are there also to protect countries who might be on the margins of being disagreed with by stronger countries. We have Trump now. Who knows who we'll have in the future? And the international law is to protect in the future as well if these actions are taken.
But it doesn't. But international law didn't protect Ukraine. No one thinks for a moment it's going to protect Taiwan. It didn't protect. It didn't protect. Was it who was invaded? Kuwait being invaded by Saddam Hussein. These countries will act however they darn well choose to act.
And
so
that's an
it's
argument.
A nonsense to say it sets a precedent.
I get it. And that's an argument you're making, which I really wanted to come on to here. And it's a broader argument as to whether the United Nations Charter needs reforming, needs being brought up to date.
Well, I would say the UN does need reforming, and the only countries involved should be democratic states.
Just as we're arguing, for instance, rightly so, that the European Convention on Human Rights should be reformed, particularly Article 8 and boats. It's not fit for purpose, which I subscribe to. But there's an argument here for not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as it is, where the United Nations Charter does do good work, but it may well need to be upgraded and updated, given the unscrupulous and dangerous world in which we live. Okay. That's a good argument. I think you and I might agree on that, I hope. But all I'm saying is, in these situations, it's all right for us to have these debates, rightly so, from a rather comfortable perspective. We're never going to be invaded by America. Well, I hope not, anyway. But where Greenland, for instance? What next to Greenland, for instance? So I think we do have to have parameters in position to actually support and create proper standards to apply by. That's not a bleeding heart lefty lawyer saying it. It's hopefully just a sensible member of the world community saying that sometimes we need restraints on people. And just because on this occasion we tend to agree with Trump, some may, and many people may, it doesn't necessarily mean we say, for the future, we need to ignore constraints.
Very interesting. John Cooper, KC, human rights lawyer, not a bleeding heart human rights lawyer, he points out. Sam Armstrong, listening to all of that, it's very interesting when you said that, the legal, moral and political aspects of this, but the reality is, the UN doesn't act if the UN doesn't want to act. If Russia and China veto something on the Security Council, nothing happens. And at the end of the day, where was the UN when people were being, butchered, in Yugoslavia? Where was the UN when Ukraine was invaded? Absolutely sodding nowhere.
And I think it's important to understand what international law is, right? It is not the fact that the UN gets to tell other countries what to do. Yeah. International law is a set of voluntary agreements between countries. There's frankly very, very rarely an arbitrator for that. And it basically works by big countries imposing power on little countries that have tended to go more wrong over the past. And it has been, as I say, a slightly convenient myth that's based around the fact that the United States was the most powerful country on earth. It's no accident that the UN is in the United States. And as the world changes, we've just got to wake up and smell the coffee of the reality of the world that, frankly, we have always been living in, which is that law is backed up by power. The reason that people don't go murdering people is not just because
someone said you can't.
You can't do it. It's because if you murder someone, you're going to get arrested and locked up. Now, on the international...
Feel free to shoplift.
Now, on the international stage, the way that works is that the US basically was going to come and sort you out if you did it. And in a sense, it's only really a continuum of that thing, which is if you go and peddle drugs and send migrants to the United States, the US is going to come and pick you up. That's the world we've always been living in, whether or not nice lawyers to pretend we haven't been.
That's the thing. This isn't a change. This is as it has always been. Everyone's just been pretending. And again, this is that whole madness of the sort of the liberal left thinking that the values of democracy and Western values and things like that they have any meaning outside of those Western democracies. They really, really don't. And they're laughing at us. Look, even when you come to things like your COPs and all of that, like India and China will play along, they just completely ignore all this stuff. They're just laughing at us, as indeed are the Channel migrants. We're going to talk about them up next. They're going to get their phones and their SIM cards seized by Border Force. Oh, that'll scare them all off, won't it? We're going to talk to Danny Shaw about the latest migrant stories. This is Talk.
until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great, but the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:49 is the time. Coming up after midday, going to be talking to one of the 8 million Venezuelan exiles to actually talk about, why Maduro was such a bad leader of Venezuela. We'll talk to him in just a couple of moments. First up, delighted to welcome Home Affairs commentator Danny Shaw back to the show. Happy New Year to you, Danny.
Happy New Year, Julia. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. Well, we've got, it's another day. It's another Labour reset. It's also another announcement on migrants. I mean, these come thick and fast on the Mondays, don't they? And today, we've been told, as of today, that migrants can have their mobile phones and SIM cards seized without the need for arrest under new laws, apparently to fight people smuggling. A, why the hell were they not doing this before? And B, what will this change?
Well, they didn't have the power to do it before. So someone, comes across on a small boat. The agencies involved, Border Agency, National Crime Agency, etc., can't just seize someone's mobile phone and look at it unless they are arrested for a criminal offence. And then they have the power to conduct searches and so on. This will give them the power without having to arrest migrants who come across. I think it's an important new power because obviously there'll be a lot of information on those phones about how they got into the boats. There may be some intelligence that will link back to the gangs who are organising this. That could help the French authorities and so on. So an important power. I don't expect it's suddenly going to reduce the boat crossings all of a sudden, but it's another little, piece in the puzzle that will hopefully start to get the crossings down and make life more difficult for the smugglers.
Well, it is. I mean, I just find it extraordinary that was not already allowed. I don't understand why you couldn't take someone's phone. How come they? I mean, by definition, you committed a crime when you've entered the country illegally. The Tories made that very clear under the law. So, well, I don't know if Labour. I think Labour tried to roll that back. But if you entered the country illegally, if you write a tweet that someone doesn't like, you have your phone confiscated. If you're accused of a crime, they think your phone may be. If you're accused of a sexual assault, your phone will be confiscated to check what you've got on your phone. How on earth were they not taking the phones from migrants? How on earth was that not allowed?
Well, it's not necessarily a crime if you come into the country on a small boat and then you immediately claim asylum. I think that is the issue.
Take the phones before they can claim asylum. It just is, frankly, laughing stock. It really is. We are, of course, a laughing stock. Now, let's also talk about a twice-deported Albanian burglar. This is Dorian Puka. He's been taunting the Home Office, filming himself partying in the VIP section of a Mayfair nightclub, Cirque Le Soir, surrounded by burlesque dancers and thousands of pounds worth of top-grade champagne. He was jailed twice, deported twice, after committing a string of burglaries, and he's come back into the country yet again, apparently attempting to claim asylum. Why is he, if they know where he is, I mean, why is he not already out on a plane out of the country?
I share your exasperation on this, Julia. I think on this one we can agree. I think it is absolutely ludicrous, and it shows that there is something wrong with our system when someone who has been convicted of an offence, imprisoned, deported, not once but twice, is able to come back and then use the asylum system effectively to prolong his stay in the UK. And while that's going on, he's still in Britain, even though he's been subject to deportation twice. And also, he's from Albania. Yeah. Most asylum claims from Albania are rejected. It is considered to be a safe country for the vast majority of people. He's making a mockery of the asylum system, and there needs to be a fundamental change in the laws to ensure that, once you're convicted, I'm sorry, you lose your right to claim asylum.
Yeah, that should be
I would absolutely
so basic.
support a law change like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, the bit that stuns me is that apparently he was charged and convicted twice for burglary. I didn't think we even bothered doing that anymore in this country.
Well, yeah, not for very many people, but for a small proportion, they are still convicted of burglary. Look, it is completely ludicrous. And the other thing is, you would have thought that even if he's put in an asylum claim, it would be fast-tracked. There surely should be someone in the Home Office going, listen, this is a priority. You deal with this within a week and get him out and get him removed. There should be a system for prioritising those sorts of claims where they're obviously unfounded. They're obviously trying to game the system. It makes me as angry as it does you.
That's encouraging to hear. I do think that the tide is very much turned on. He's a former advisor to Yvette Cooper, I need to point out, as we went on the show before. That so I think it is interesting. How many people are just across the political swathes to think, look, this is all madness. There's also a story about Lord Justice Bean. He was one of those 3 Court of Appeal judges who ruled that asylum seekers could stay in the Bell Hotel in Epping, despite protests every single week. They're still ongoing about asylum seekers being in that hotel. And one of the judges, as I say, Justice Bean, he's now accused of deciding that migrants can remain in it. So apologies, he's now involved in another case, blocking eviction from accommodation, even if asylum seekers have been ordered to leave. And this is 3 migrants from India, Hong Kong and Sudan. And their asylum applications were withdrawn because they basically weren't going to get through. They've each launched an appeal and they've had their accommodation removed. And this guy apparently is saying, oh, no, it's fine. They can keep their accommodation. I mean, why don't we just give these people a house and have done with it?
Look, I mean, I've got a feeling there may be a difference of opinion here with you on this one. We certainly, firstly, we don't know all the details about the case and the ruling and why the judgment was made in the way that it was. And I haven't seen all those details, in the time that I've had a look to study the story. The second thing is, I don't really like stories which highlight a judge's previous political affiliations. This is a very distinguished barrister who then became a judge. He was chairman of the Bar Council for a while. He has no doubt made rulings that have gone one way and others that have gone the other way. You can highlight some rulings that you might think show that he's politically biased in some way. I could show you rulings by another judge who was a Conservative Party candidate who made a ruling on the Epping case, which went in the other direction. We can play that game if you want. Okay. I don't really like that said, game. I have a lot of respect for the judiciary, and I've sat in court for many years in many cases, and they are some of the brightest and smartest.
I agree with you on that. However, there are lots of people who argue we need to have more diversity among our judges. They can't be old white men.
I agree with that.
Yeah, no. But the argument is given because people bring their personal perspectives. I think we need to have more scrutiny of the personal perspectives, because certainly when you look at the asylum, not particularly this case, but the asylum tribunal cases we've got, it is impossible for people to come up with some of those rulings, about Albanians and what was it, chicken nuggets for their kids. You can't come up with those sort of rulings unless you have a certain political perspective. I just don't think it's possible. I think we do need to talk about the political perspectives of our judges. But I'm throwing that out there. Just one final story I want to talk about, not on the issue of migrants, but obviously on criminal issues. At least 30 dangerous mental health patients secretly freed from high security hospitals have gone on to kill again for the first time in recent years. This is according to the Telegraph. Around 250 violent offenders are detained in institutions like Broadmoor and Rampton and Ashworth each year because they're too mentally ill to go to prison. But many, like of course the Nottingham killer Valdo Cullercane, are told their conditions are so acute they're unlikely ever to be freed. But it's revealed that actually more than half of those who were sent to secure hospitals are quietly freed within 5 years. Most of them are out within 10 years. And many are going on to kill again.
Well, let's put the figures in perspective. 33 people went on to kill again after being released from special hospitals. That's, you know, a tragedy for every single case, but it's over a period of 26 years.
Okay.
So it's, you know, just over one a year, one too many.
Yeah.
But let's just give a bit of perspective. And
Fair
there
enough.
are 500 who are freed from those hospitals every single year. So over that period, there's some 13,000 or so who've been released. So a very small proportion go on to kill again. But I think what the issue does highlight, and I do think this is a concern, is the lack of transparency about the decision-making of who's released. These independent mental health tribunals are, I think, in almost all cases conducted in secret. We don't know very much at all about the decision-making, and it's very difficult for victims to make their views and have their representations considered.
Yeah.
And that is an issue that I think is worth highlighting.
Absolutely, that has absolutely been a major issue. And we've seen that in other cases, even regardless of whether there's mental illness as part of the issue. Always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Home Affairs commentator Danny Shaw. I'll get Sam Armstrong's thoughts on all the other big stories of the day coming up after midday. Up next, we're going to be talking to a Venezuelan exile. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute. This is Daniel DiMartino. To find out, why are so many in the Western media just skirting over the fact of what Maduro actually did to the Venezuelan people? Why would Donald Trump want him ousted? Why would all the Venezuelan people want him out of power as well? We're going to talk to Daniel DiMartino up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, always fantastic to have your company. And if you've just tuned in, a very happy new year to you. And it's a new year. We've got a new reset, regular reset from the government. This one's over cost of living crisis. Apparently it's all going to be fine by the end of the year. Love to know whether you believe that or not. Is it all going to be fine for Venezuela is the really big question many are asking. And what should Keir Starmer's response have been to Donald Trump's launch of that military assault on Venezuela to seize Nicolas Maduro and his wife? They're appearing in a New York court about 5 o'clock UK time today. But Donald Trump has announced that, well, the US is now running the oil-rich country, although the Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, is being sworn in as president to serve as interim leader, but being told in no uncertain terms, do as you're told or you'll be next. Donald Trump is also now threatening a military action against Colombia if they don't stop the flow of illicit drugs to the US, and also has set his sights on a takeover of Greenland as well, claiming it would be on self-defence grounds because of the huge number of Russian and Chinese vessels in the vicinity of Greenland. Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has said in the last few moments that he stands with Denmark after Donald Trump threatened to annex Greenland. And of course, it's Danish territory after the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said that she was right to refuse the US president any claim to the territory. Well, the plot thickens. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. We're also going to be talking about that horrific fire in the Swiss ski resort and the abject fire safety in that club, and how concerned should we be about bars and clubs in the UK after so many young people, teenagers even, died in that horrific fire. And we're also going to be talking about, despite last year's Supreme Court ruling in April making it really clear that unless you are biologically a woman, you ain't allowed in women's spaces like toilets and changing rooms, why is, of all places, HM Courts and Tribunal Service still allowing men into women's toilets if they claim that they think they're a woman? We'll be talking about that with Mara Forstetter from the Sex Matters campaign group. All that coming up. I want to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. In particular, my question to you today, was Donald Trump right or wrong to launch a military raid to arrest the Venezuelan leader? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Delighted to introduce you once again to commentator Sam Armstrong, joining me for the whole show. Just want your response before we go to our next guest to talk about Venezuela in more detail. But in terms of Keir Starmer saying he's standing with Denmark and saying that the Danish Prime Minister is right to refuse the US President any claim to the territory of Greenland, because he's basically said, you know, Greenland's next.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a bit of a pantomime.
Well, you can say that, but they just launched a raid on Venezuela.
Well, look, the Venezuelan president had been indicted 5 years ago. This is a long-standing issue. Trump has said he wants to buy it. Obviously, the Danish aren't up for selling it. I don't think anyone is paying any notice whatsoever to what Keir Starmer or anybody else has to say on the subject. But look, again to Europe, I'd say this very gently. If you don't want your territories going and invading them, look, bear in mind, right, Denmark owns Greenland because it went and invaded it a few hundred years ago.
Small point worth making.
You know, if you don't want the US to come and take it back, invest in your army rather than relying on the US to fund your own defence for the last 40 years.
Well, they've been told. Thank you very much from Sam Armstrong. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Again, what does Keir Starmer mean by he stands with Denmark? I mean, we can't even defend Ukraine, for goodness sake, on our territory. Right now, let's put the question I'm putting to you to my next guest. He's Daniel DiMartino. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute in the States and an exile from Venezuela. And he joins us to talk about, well, what's really been going on. A very good afternoon to you, Daniel.
Very good afternoon to you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'll put the question I'm putting to our audience. Was Donald Trump right or wrong to launch that military raid to arrest the leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife?
Yes. You know, I woke up. It was an early morning for me, not because of the news. I just slept early. I woke up early at 6 a.m. local time, and my phone was ringing like crazy. Everybody telling me the news. And I'm like, what is going on? Somebody died? What did I do? You know, I don't know what's happening. And then I learned about the news of Maduro being captured, and it's like a dream for me as a Venezuelan. And I think that that's the same reaction for millions of people. People are dancing in the streets all over the world, celebrating. So how can somebody in a different country tell us, oh no, this is so wrong? Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker. Countries conduct police operations abroad all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, the contrast between, particularly on the left around the world, saying how terrible and outrageous this is, and the actual Venezuelan people, who, as we know, 80% of Venezuelans voted for the opposition last time round. And we know that 8 million of a very small country had left, like you, to seek a better life abroad. I'd like to go back a little bit and get a little bit of background from you. I mean, you go around, you give talks at universities and everywhere. You're an economist by trade, basically explaining to people about, why we should learn the lessons of Venezuela. I mean, Maduro's learning the lessons and will in a court later today in Manhattan. But why the world, America and Britain included, need to learn the lessons of Venezuela. Tell us what happened under, well, first Chavez and then Maduro, and why you chose to leave.
Yes, so what's important about Venezuela is that unlike every other socialist country, it became socialist democratically. You see, that Eastern Europe didn't become socialist because the Eastern Europeans voted for it. The Russians didn't vote for Lenin either in 1917. The Chinese didn't elect Mao. The Cubans didn't elect Castro. Yeah. But the Venezuelans elected Hugo Chavez. And that original sin of voting for him then became a forced regime, right? They began cheating on the elections after their socialist policies became unpopular, but they got in democratically. And it matters because that's what could happen to us in the rest of the democratic world. That's what could happen to the United Kingdom. I mean, it's slowly happening with the rise of government, after the end of the Thatcher years. I'm a big admirer of Margaret Thatcher since I was a very young kid, because she stood for free enterprise, and free enterprise is what brings prosperity to a people. In Venezuela, I had to line up for my own food. I had to, have no power for hours. I had to bring water in buckets up to my apartment. And we didn't used to live that way, which is what matters.
That's the thing. Let's go back to before Chavez and Maduro. And people often talk about Maduro as if he's very different from what Chavez did. He's not. I mean, he's just carrying on, just a worse version of what was already bad. But the Venezuelan people, I mean, they were living in one of the richest economies in the world, these vast oil supplies. Everything was going absolutely brilliantly. Why did they then vote for socialism? I mean, because normally we see that, as you say, it's something that's imposed or something that desperate people who are living in poverty might choose.
So, well, there's two factors. One is a short-term one. Venezuela had a banking crisis in the late 90s. There was a recession. There were corruption scandals of the previous government. And Chavez was just a very charismatic politician that capitalized on that, deceived people, they voted for him, and that's how he got elected. But Venezuela had nationalized the oil industry in the 70s. And since he nationalized the oil industry, production stagnated. They tried to backtrack and bring back the private sector in the 90s, but it was too late. The recession happened and Chavez got elected. But you are right. Even then, even though Venezuela was undergoing some issues, it was still the richest country in Latin America. Yeah. It did not have this massive inequality that people claim was the reason they got elected. It was actually less unequal than most other Latin American countries. So these are all excuses. People just got lied to, and that's very easy with charismatic people.
Yeah, indeed. And Maduro, when Chavez died, Maduro took over, and he basically made things even worse, because we're not just talking about the incompetence of socialism and these vast oil supplies, which, because the government was now running the extraction process, were basically, wasn't there a point where basically it would cost them 10 times as much to get a barrel of oil out of the ground as any other country? So they lost money on oil production.
And the thing, Julie, is that if socialism was going to work somewhere, it would be in the country that has the largest oil reserves in the world, with free money coming from the ground. And it didn't. It was still not enough money.
Yeah, very fair point. But then we added to that, we saw for the Venezuelans sort of vast corruption, which always goes hand in hand with socialism, interestingly, because of the incompetence, but vast corruption and also drug running. These are the look. We know this is what Donald Trump is indicting him on. Narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine trafficking. How involved was Maduro and his wife, as far as you're aware, and his government with the drug trafficking?
They are a cartel, because after they destroyed the oil industry, they couldn't profit anymore from the oil, right? The oil was government run. The government destroyed it. But you know what was not government run? Drug trafficking. That is certainly privately run and everything, very capitalist in a way. And they were capitalists in their personal level, even though they wanted socialism for the rest of us.
Funny that, yeah.
And so that's how they made money. They paid off their interest. Look, it goes so deep that Maduro's own nephews, the biological nephews of Celia, the wife, were arrested and indicted and then convicted of drug trafficking to the United States. The problem was that Joe Biden, the previous president, he gave them a pardon and sent them back to Venezuela. A big mistake.
Why?
Well, he wanted to exchange them for some American prisoners in Venezuela.
Okay.
And then Maduro ended up kidnapping more Americans.
Yeah, well, this we've heard so much more about what's gone on with Colombia as well. And Donald Trump has said that Colombia's next on the list. We'll come on to Greenland in a moment. But I mean, has Venezuela been flooding America with drugs? How big an issue is it?
So it's been mainly cocaine, but the issue is that a lot of people say, well, it's all the Mexican cartels. But where do you think the Mexican cartels get their cocaine from? It's produced in Colombia, and then it's transported through Venezuela with Venezuelan state-owned resources. Boats, little airplanes that fly all over to Central America. I mean, there's been many analyses and studies of this that prove it. The Center for Strategic and International Studies has a really great map of this. That is how most of the cocaine gets to Europe too, by the way, not just the United States. Spain, the corruption schemes that are happening with Venezuela, and that now we will begin to uncover. Because remember, Maduro is going to give information now to the U.S. government. And a lot of people abroad, I think, should be very scared because we're going to know everything they did.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because there was a lot of talk on Saturday when we found out that he had been seized in that Truth Social post from Donald Trump saying he'd been captured. Extraordinary revelation. But actually, this was all a bit of a farce because actually he'd done a deal to get out of the country, and he would have been offered the usual. You can keep a certain number of billions, and you go off at your Caribbean island or head to Moscow, as they often end up doing, and you'll be fine. But it doesn't sound like a deal has been done. But would you expect that one will now be done if he's facing the rest of his life behind bars?
Well, I think the main priority of the administration first is freedom for Venezuela and prosperity, right? Yeah. Especially for the oil industry. You cannot have oil companies invest in Venezuela because they simply won't unless there's stability and a democratic government that guarantees that after Trump leaves office, they're not just going to take all their property again. Right? So this is why I think they're threatening Delcy Rodriguez so much. And I think that's a good thing.
She's Maduro's vice president.
Yes. And by the way, she has a long history of violence and Marxism. Her father was a Marxist guerrilla terrorist who got killed in the 70s after he kidnapped an American CEO for 3 years.
Wow.
I mean, this woman was raised by another psychopath.
Right. So this thing, a lot of people are very concerned about, why did Donald Trump leave the Maduro, and his acolytes in power with the support of the military? Why did he not say, we're handing over power to the party that did actually win the last elections, to the opposition?
Yeah, I think the answer is pretty simple. Number one, I mean, this operation was very difficult. Imagine having done it to capture about 5 more people. Americans would have died. Almost certainly in that complex of an operation. Number two, this already gives them the signal, and they already were threatened, and they can do it again one by one. And now they have the chance to do an orderly transition. The military does not support the population, Julia. Yeah. This is important that people understand. The military are the drug dealers. This is not like other Latin American countries where you have the military that are, they're just standing by and judging who they're going to support. No, the soldiers, the low-level soldiers that escaped, they're not defending Maduro. Mm-hmm. Only the Cubans were. The people who ended up getting killed in the raid, 32 were Cubans. The Cuban government already announced. So. But all the generals, all the lieutenants, all of them are drug traffickers. And I think Trump prefers an orderly and stable transition.
Yeah. And we've certainly seen America and the West generally don't have a very strong track record when it comes to this idea of nation building after they've toppled leaders. What do you think happens next? And what are the people back home? I don't know if you've still got your family back in Venezuela, I assume. And what do they want to happen next? Because we've seen, there have been some sort of protests and counter-protests, some people dancing on the streets, but there will be people who've been on the Maduro payroll for a very long time who don't want things to change. Well,
this is important for, I think, every viewer to understand. The overwhelming majority of Venezuelans want the regime out. They're scared of protesting in Venezuela because the armed groups are still around. They're actually crossing all over the streets, Maduro's armed groups, threatening people so that everybody stays home. So what people want is freedom. They want Venezuela to be what it used to be. Julia, my own grandparents immigrated to Venezuela in the 1950s from Italy and Spain because they were poorer in Italy and Spain than in Venezuela. And they found freedom, they have found prosperity. We lived a normal life with a car, with a home, going to school, having food, and then no electricity, and then no water. People just want to go back to what it can be. And that's not just good for us. We would stop exporting drugs and illegal immigrants and start welcoming immigrants and exporting oil. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing for the world?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, what do you make of all the critics in America, in Europe, and others? I mean, we've got Labour MPs and senior figures here in the UK saying, look, this is against the rules-based international order. It's a breach of international law, and this sets a precedent for any dictator, anyone in the world. They can just go and do what they want. You're laughing. What's your response?
Well, because I gotta be very honest. I do not care about the rules. I care about what's just and what's right. And President Trump did what's right for the Venezuelan people, for the American people, and honestly for the world. And if you're against that because of some president, do you think Putin cares about presidents? Exactly. He's out there poisoning his opponents. He's interfering in other elections. He's not going to stop doing that because of what we do or not do. If anything, this sends them a signal that you're on notice, this is what we can do, and do not mess with the free world.
Well, there's a lot of people saying, again, presidents being open. Colombia may be next, Denmark next. There have been some threats, even, Iran. We've had 9 days of protests against the Iranian regime and very clear signals from the American government saying, look, don't start shooting protesters because we will be taking action. Now, we've already seen some people shot in Iran. Yes. Do you think this is America reasserting itself as the world's policeman? In which case, is that a good thing?
Well, it is reasserting itself as in it's going to use its power to advance its interests abroad, not some abstract notions. And by the way, I'm fully endorsing what Trump is threatening to Colombia. The Colombian government is totally in cahoots with Maduro, and Petro is very fearful of what will be revealed in Venezuela because his campaign, the reason he's president of Colombia is the Venezuelan regime. And there's a long history that I think people should research there. So I think that Marco Rubio understands that they really care especially about the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is, the American sphere of influence, isn't it? There is this argument that, that people can talk about this international rules-based order, but it's all just a mirage, and actually it's all about power. Yeah. It's all about what your willingness and your ability to actually use that power. Donald Trump has made that clear. What do you think the future will be for Venezuela? And would you consider going back if it did once again, start booming?
I see two scenarios. One, a positive one, that is there's a transition in the next few months and then the country begins to be rebuilt. And if that happens, of course, I would love to go and help. And I'm very close to, the people who are trying to achieve that. But I do think there's still this scenario where the Trump administration may be deceived by the current regime, as in delaying the transition enough that Trump is out of office and then they stay in power and nothing changes. So that is my concern.
Very interesting. Really
thank fascinating. You for having me,
well,
Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate that. That is Daniel DiMartino. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, an exile from Venezuela. Sam Armstrong, listening to all of that. It is absolutely fascinating, again, how little the media in the West has covered just the levels of degradation that the Venezuelan people have been pushed to, the fact that it is the biggest single refugee crisis in the world. We don't hear about this in the media. The fact that people resorted to having to, eat their own pets, scrabble for food on the street. Middle-class families living a normal life who had their homes, their farms, their shops seized by the authorities.
I'm sorry to say this as stridently as I do, but it doesn't matter because Maduro wasn't Jewish. I mean, that's the reality. That's the reality. The West has decided that there is only one group that is committing human rights abuses in their view, and that's the only Jewish country on earth. And we hear endlessly and just incessantly about the latest supposed outrage, most of which later turn out to be total and utter falsehoods. But it doesn't matter because it's spread halfway around the world before the truth has got its trousers on. And shame on the broadcast producers, shame on the newspapers, shame on everybody that ignores the plight of 8 million refugees from Venezuela and talks incessantly about one country just as part of their own flagrant brazen anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. Just to let you know, Nicolas Maduro has now set off from the detention facility in Brooklyn, I think, where he's being held, taking him to a court in Manhattan. He's due to make an appearance at the federal court in Manhattan, 5 o'clock UK time today, but he's been put onto a helicopter. They love a perp walk in America, do they not? But he's being transferred to that New York court. 12:23 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts, your reaction to what Daniel, our guest, had to say. Love to hear your thoughts on whether or not Donald Trump was right or wrong, and the implications for Keir Starmer. A lot of criticism for him from backbenchers, the usual suspects, the Richard Bergens, the Emily Thornberrys and others, about, basically anything that Trump does is wrong, but ignoring the fact that people like our guest Daniel DiMartino are saying, actually the Venezuelans are dancing in the street and are so delighted and happy and grateful to finally have Maduro out of their lives. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. We'll take your calls up next. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great, but the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:26 is the time. Welcome back to Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to your calls on Donald Trump and indeed on any other the big topics you want to talk to us about today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's speak to Robert, who's in London. Robert, what do you make of what Donald Trump did? Was he right or wrong to launch that military raid?
Absolutely right. And by the way, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my love.
I do like getting your stats on X when you go off on your holidays.
Yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't resist.
No, it's good. Look, the reason, and I'm calling because I used to live in a country that is probably less than 450 miles away from Nicaragua, and I grew up, I spent part of my years in Haiti, which was a dictatorship on the level of Maduro in terms of...
Haiti's a proper basket case on every front.
Well, that's part of the reason why I'm calling in. I mean, all these international leftists who insist that they know more about socialism than people who live in socialist households, really, I mean, we're going to have to do something about our education system. We all know that the teaching profession is massively left-wing. It's far left in many cases. And they just don't educate young people to understand the horrors of what happens when you go down that socialist...
No, socialism has never been tried properly, Robert. That's what they say. I permanently have arguments on social media with the British Socialism Party, whatever they're called. They always say, no, that wasn't proper. So every time there's socialism, they say it hasn't been tried properly.
Well, I've come to the conclusion that the real definition of a socialist is someone who just denies reality. They don't understand what motivates humans. They don't understand how businesses work. They can't put resources to work in an efficient way, and so everyone gets poorer until you starve. And then when you protest it, they line you up against the wall and they kill you or they shoot you.
But that's the thing. Corruption and dictatorship go hand in hand with socialism. They're not things that sometimes happen alongside. They are part and parcel. You can't run a socialist state without both of those things.
Absolutely. You have to have the corruption because you have to lie to people because you haven't got the good ideas to make things work. It is really just a creed for lazy people who can't work out how to make a business or a country operate properly. Yeah. So they just dictate, and they become dictators, of course. Now, I've lived in it, and when you say degradation, it's interesting, you used that word earlier. I cannot tell you what happens when a country becomes so poor and there's authoritarians in charge, and the things people do to themselves because they are so dirt poor. You can't repeat it on the radio.
No, women are forced into prostitution. People sell their children. I mean, people eat their pets. I mean, that is degradation.
I've seen people selling their children. There was a place you could go to in Haiti and you could see it happening. They break young babies' limbs so they grow up deformed for the begging. Yeah. People do not understand in the West the horror of these places. Yeah. So when this happens and you get the usual crowd of idiots, and they are idiots, lamenting the fact that international law wasn't adhered to, I'd like to point out to them that it was under international law that all these horrors happen and that still a third of the world lives on less than $4 or $5 a day. Yeah. So, that sets them aside.
But also, by the way, people on the left will say, but we have inequality here. Yeah, people are not. I'm sorry. No one needs to beg on the streets of this country. No one needs to sell their kids in this country.
Like I say, it is a creed for, brainwashed, stupid, greedy, lazy people, right? That's what socialism really is. Now, what I wanted to say to you was, what people who call in and say, oh, it's all about the oil. Really? What, the country with the largest oil reserves in the world, their politics are dictated to around oil? Is that really a newsflash? Why was China there? Why was Iran there? Why is Russia there? Yeah. Look, the reality is Haiti will not get the bailout from the Americans. It might do eventually when he's settled the bigger players, right? Because ultimately, Haiti's not going to get looked after in this way. The Venezuelans know that Trump's going to do a deal, and that's what he does. The oil companies will invest, and everyone will see their lives get better, right? And because if you don't watch what Trump says in the mainstream media, but you actually look at a lot of his speeches and you analyse them, he is a great believer that in his mind, capitalism is how you get some sort of basic freedoms guaranteed. Because he says the private market will deliver what people want. Yeah. And it's not perfect. It's never perfect. Nope.
But it's the best system. It's the best one we've come up with. Robert, such an interesting call. Thank you very much. Can I ask you, what were you doing living in Haiti of all places? Has he gone? Oh, I just lost him. Don. Well, hopefully he'll call in again. We'll find out. Let's talk to Steve, who's actually where I was just over Christmas, in Phuket, in Thailand. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Julia. Where in Phuket were you?
On the west coast. I can't remember right now. Bang Tao Beach, something like that. We were there over a week ago. I can't remember, but it was very, very lovely beach. But anyway, Steve, what do you want to say?
Yeah, Bang Tao Beach is about 3 kilometres north of us. I'm in Kamala.
Lovely.
But yes, what I'd like to say is about the fact that they're getting back into the EU. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with the supposed deal which Mr. Starmer did to this country was sign away our fishing rights
Yep.
back to the EU, which was a very important part for a lot of people back in 2016. But it will be more. He's selling out the farmers.
Yep.
Encouraging our farmers to put this horrible stuff into cow feed, which is killing cows in Denmark, and they're about to ban it entirely.
Okay.
But lots of other things about fertilizer they can put on the fields.
Yeah. But just aligning with all the agri and the food rules with the EU. So the whole point of us leaving was we could make our own rules. But look, the EU did make it difficult, though, for trade. They deliberately put in, I mean, it was a punishment meeting. They put in a load of problems for Northern Ireland. They basically, you know, made loads and loads of extra checks. They knew what they were doing. They wanted to make life difficult. Starmer's argument will be, look, I just want to make life easier. This is our biggest market on our doorstep, and we want to trade with them. And, well, you know, he's got a fair point there, hasn't he?
They refer to the European market or European Union as our biggest market. You've got to remember it's 26 countries, which they all have their foibles. The French, despite the rules of the EU, restrict things going in and out.
Yeah.
And the Germans did as well to favour the Polish farmers, etc., etc.
Yeah. So we're not gonna the deal we're gonna want. Do you think that we would ever have a referendum to rejoin, and do you think we'd vote yes or no?
I think it would be no, again, but it depends on the politicians. The politicians, despite the Conservative government at the time and most of the Labour Party and the press were in favour of staying in Europe, but the British people, almost the same as the Norwegians, voted no.
Yep.
Considerable majority, as you said, 51.5%, would have been good enough for the Remain people.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, it's going to creep back in, about all sorts of things. We wouldn't be able to get ourselves at the European Court of Human Rights if we went back in.
Yep.
And all these little things that will affect everything: engineering, steel production, aluminium production,
energy policy. You name it. Oh no, they're gonna just get it by hook or by crook. We will be to all intents and purposes back in, and we'll be like the boiled frog. We just won't really notice, except we are going to keep on noticing. Steve, great call. Thank you very much. He's not in the EU anyway. He's in Thailand having a lovely time. Thank you very much, Steve, for that call. 12:34 is now. Just a really quick reaction to that from Sam Armstrong. There is the thing. There's no doubt at all. Keir Starmer, he spent 4 years after Brexit, or 3.5 years, trying to make sure that we had a second referendum, stop Brexit from actually happening when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary. There's no doubt he wants to go back in, but he knows the British people won't put up with it. But that's not going to stop them doing it by hook or by crook without us legally doing it.
Yeah, and these little individual treaties. And our caller's right to mention about the ECHR, which is some of these we have to sign up to the ECHR. And remember, it's a trap. Right? Yep. They want us stuck in here so that when a future government, and goodness knows Keir Starmer is kind of on his way out, he's trying to set up the trap. So when a future government tries to get out of the ECHR to do something about the migrant problem that Starmer won't do, some special interest group or another will turn around and say, oh, well, you can't because it will be bad for our deal on engineers. You know,
the obsession with Europe is so funny. People talk about Brexit is like you're obsessed with it. No, we had a vote. I'm done and dusted. Only reason I carried on talking about it for 3 or 4 years because we hadn't actually done it. But these people are obsessed. The Lib Dems, the Greens, large swathes, a vast amount of they've been the Labour Party and quite a lot of Tories, absolutely obsessed with it. It's like a fetish for them. They think that every problem that we've got is a result of Brexit. They'll ignore the fact that our economic figures will be actually bizarrely better than Germany or France, even though they haven't Brexited. I mean, it is extraordinary. They are willingness to ignore every fact to say that if only we were in the EU, everything would be okay. I mean, the immigration would be solved, illegal immigration, the economy, you name it, everything would be fine as long as we're back in the EU. They're stark staring mad.
Yeah, and at a time when the case of being in the EU has never, ever been weaker. This is an economy that's in the toilet, their migrant problem's worse than us. Every problem we have, it's worse there. And the Lib Dems, the Greens, Labour, their response, all aboard the sinking ship.
Yeah, absolutely. It's extraordinary. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be talking to a fire expert about that horrific fire at that Swiss nightclub, which has left 40 people dead, many of them teenagers and young people in their 20s, and many, many more horrifically burnt, life-changing injuries. But how likely is it that such a fire could happen here? It sounds like there was a basically flammable insulation on the ceiling of this club that basically may as well be in Grenfell Tower. But how many bars and clubs in this country could be also so dangerous for our youngsters? We're going to talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:38 is the time. Let's turn our attention to that horrific fire in Switzerland in a nightclub, the Constellation, that has left 40 dead and many, many, many dozens more injured, many with life-changing burns, many of whom actually had to be flown out of the country to specialist burn units because of the lack of facilities, even in a country like Switzerland. And the big concern about, well, fire safety precautions, not just in Switzerland in that particular town, but actually around the world and indeed in the UK. Let's talk to fire safety expert Arnold Tarling. Thank you so much for joining us, Arnold.
That's a pleasure, Julia.
I wish we were working under happier circumstances, but I have to say it's absolutely shocking, the images we've got from that nightclub where young people there, people with their bottles of champagne, and they've got these sparklers, and you can just see the point of which the flame hit the ceiling, and just all hell broke out. That fire swept through that nightclub within, it would appear seconds. So many people lost their lives, so many people's lives ruined as a result. And there have been so many issues raised about fire safety, the lack of proper regulation there, the flammable insulation and the ceiling, and fire doors being padlocked shut, so unable to be opened. What did you make of what you've seen?
Absolutely horrendous, totally avoidable, should never, ever have happened. It all goes back to a refurbishment when they kitted out that bar and put what appears to be polyurethane sound deadening material across the ceiling. Had they gone for a more expensive melamine foam, it wouldn't have combusted and you wouldn't have had the disaster. So probably money saving. Maybe the product sold was not what they thought they were buying, that it was a fake material. We get loads of fake materials coming in from places like China.
Yeah. And how would you know? We know that there are criminal prosecutions being planned against the bar managers, but also question marks about the bar owner, who apparently has got some very serious convictions himself. So we've got some big question marks about, their concern for legalities in the first place. But it would be perfectly possible for someone to be completely law-abiding and think they're abiding by all the regulations, and they've been sold a product which is just totally unsafe.
Indeed, people who were having Grenfell Tower clad, the council believed they were having a safe material. Yeah. The British Board of Agreement certificate said it was safe. In fact, the insulation said it was safe for use on high-rise.
Yeah.
But we now know that the building research establishment undertook a fake test to get it through using materials you cannot use on a building.
Yeah.
Having already failed one test, they then retested it in a way that it couldn't be used and then produced a certificate that didn't show how they faked it.
And this is the thing, you sort of, I know we've learnt that, from the Grenfell inquiry, just the sort of the frustration at, how simple it would have been to have got these things right. But I saw one report from a fire expert over the weekend saying, that the stuff on the ceiling, you may as well have just poured petrol all over the ceiling. It was that flammable.
Yes, it's just solid fuel, like petrol. These plastics that they are pushing in, are highly dangerous. Yeah. We saw it in that country. We saw it in Rhode Island. We've seen disasters in Dublin.
Yeah.
These cases are getting repeated around the world. And when it comes down to the building regulations, when you're actually doing the building itself and all this construction, you get a certain degree of inspection, nowhere near thorough enough.
Yeah.
But then when people do a refurbishment, building regulations and the building control, not consulted at all.
No, that's very interesting. And again, Switzerland, this is a functioning, wealthy country. This isn't, it's not like Bangladesh, where buildings collapse because, everyone's paid off the building inspectors. But, I mean, the fire safety precautions, quite apart from, the precaution of not having flammable material on the ceiling, we're told that fire extinguishers at the bar were kept in a room that was usually locked. The emergency exit was also often locked. Again, these things completely illegal. And then now we're looking at the bar owners being charged investigated on suspicion of negligence causing homicide, bodily harm and arson. Very, very serious charges. I suppose the concern for a lot of people is, they go away on holiday. I've sent my daughter off to, an underground bar, on a ski holiday before, and I've been to, and thinking, wow, I'd love to know what the material there is, because I'd love to know how we would get out of that club in France. But, what about the clubs and the bars here in the UK? Is there any chance that we've also got that sort of insulation in places here? Because one of the things we discovered after Grenfell was, as much as it was being pushed at the time, it's like, it's because there were a load of council tenants and it was a horrible Tory council and these were all poor people. No, this was across the board. Private hospitals, private schools, very fancy, apartment blocks owned entirely by private residents also had this insulation. So how likely is it that this could happen here?
Well, it can happen very, very quickly. It comes to Christmas and people put up loads of decorations. They stick a Christmas tree in, maybe a natural one. Let's go for a natural Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Well, when they've dried out and everything, they go up incredibly quickly. And you put that near somewhere, maybe the exit door, how do you get out?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I always do when I go into establishments is I check my fire exit.
Really?
Can I get out? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I've had a number of times where I've gone in and said, I want this removed. I don't want chairs in the exit. I want that table moved from over there. They argue with me. There was one in Beckenham. They'd already had a fire there once. And I noted that the people were coming out the kitchen, chucking stuff down opening the fire door and chucking the rubbish in. At the end of the meal, I got up, I opened the door. You could not see the staircase. It was full top to bottom with waste food and rubbish. And I insisted that they cleaned it out there and then and never went back.
Yeah, funnily enough, we need, this is the thing, I think the thing in this country in particular, you think that there's so many sort of health and safety things where people getting involved with people's lives far too much and it's all too nitpicky. If you've ever done any building work at home, you go, you have to do this, you have to do that. You think, for goodness sake. But when it comes to the stuff that is really important, that saves lives, that work isn't done.
Work isn't done or it's neglected. They were always told lessons will be learned.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, they're not learnt.
No.
They're forgotten. They're not taught. They're ignored. We'll get away with it. And it all goes back to exactly as it was before.
Yeah.
And the number of places I actually go to which don't comply in one way or another Maybe the fire extinguishers are there, but you have to walk into the property to get them because they're not near the exits where you require them.
Yeah.
They're not hanging at the right height. They're not the right type, even. So you go into certain food bars and they've got the dry powder extinguishers. You never use them indoors.
Right.
They're the wrong ones. They don't work. And there's a wet chem chemical which you use on fat fryers, you know, like you have the chip fryers in restaurants and places, and they don't have it. And that's the only one that will work.
Yeah, again, this is quite scary. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like you, I'm walking in a place and go, I'm walking straight out again, it's not safe. But again, these teenagers, these 20-year-olds, they wouldn't have known this, would they? Arnold Tulling, really appreciate talking to you, although you frighten the living daylights out of me. But maybe we need to have that fire safety expert, Arnold. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong, this story is just absolutely horrific. And again, you know, people who, your kids go off to a bar or club. I mean, some of these kids were 15 years old. You know, and you want to hope they're coming home again. We know that a former pupil at 2 British schools, Charlotte Nidham, is one of those who's died. Numerous others injured. I mean, they've really struggled to identify people because people are so horrifically burned, even people who are alive. Yeah. This is absolutely horrific. I have no doubt at all this could happen again. It's happened before. It's going to happen again.
Yeah, and obviously no one is to blame other than those responsible for installing the system and all the rest of it. However, one thing that did jump out at me was the number of these kids that so very tragically they saw the ceiling go alight and their first instinct to get their phones and to film it.
They thought, apparently they would have thought it was part of the show.
But I mean, I would say this: if you're a parent and you've got a kid of that age, you've got to tell them if something's going wrong. Get out of there. Do not get your phone out. By all accounts, when I've read that material is so flammable that actually the chances of the fact that anyone got out at all is incredible. Yeah. That's the thing. 12:48 is time. I'm going to take a break. Now we're going to be talking about the English courts that are ignoring their own Supreme Court ruling on whether or not men who think that they're women can be allowed in women's toilets. We're going to talk to Maya Forstetter from Sex Matters about that. Up next, this is Talk.
Until we start creating deterrence, in other words, arrest, charge, prosecution and a suitable punishment, nothing is going to change. The police can do all their performative policing, which they're such big fans of. Oh, this week we launched a shoplifting initiative in Altrincham and we arrested 17 people, for example. Yeah, that's great. But the shoplifters know that they're here today and gone tomorrow, so they go back to their thieving ways.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. She just lost 10 minutes of my show before Ian Collins is here to take you through the afternoon. And just to let you know, the Nicolas Maduro, the former Venezuelan leader, has been transferred to court from his detention centre. He's arrived in Manhattan. He got a helicopter, the perp walk. It's all been very, very dramatic, but he is handcuffed and he has been surrounded by DEA agents and he has been taken into that Manhattan court where he's due to appear on drug conspiracy trafficking charges. about 5 o'clock UK time. They're obviously getting him in nice and early. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that later. Right now, let's talk about our own courts, shall we? Let's talk about the courts in England, which at HM Courts and Tribunal Service have decided to completely ignore the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, which last April made a really clear ruling. Not changing the law, but reaffirming what the law was and always has been, which is that when you talk about single-sex spaces, that's based on biological sex, not what a bloke claims he is on a Wednesday afternoon. Trans women, aka trans-identified men, are not allowed in women's toilets, changing rooms, or other single-sex spaces. We thought it was clear. We thought everyone would pay attention. Well, even the courts haven't paid attention. Let's talk about this with Maya Forstetter. She's Chief Executive of Sex Matters. Very good afternoon to you, Maya.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you for joining me. I mean, I have to say, I kind of expected a bunch of the woke people running the NHS hospitals or art centres or whatever might try and ignore this. But we're talking about the actual court system itself. They are still allowing men, let's call them what they are, to walk into women's toilets in courts, whether they're, you know, the people who are witnesses or criminals who or suspects or the staff. Totally ignoring the actual ruling from their own highest court. How is this happening?
I don't know. We've been
good answer.
Yeah, we've been writing to them since April, since the month of the Supreme Court's judgment, back and forwards, letters back and forwards saying the law is clear. The Equality and Human Rights Commission has said what it means. The Supreme Court has said what it means. Are you going to change your policy? And they keep writing back to us and saying, we're working at pace. We have a task group. We're waiting for the guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission. Just any excuse for why they can't just be clear and just say no to men who want to use women's toilets in court.
It's so simple. I mean, but you at Sex Matters, you've instigated quite a few different court cases. We've seen, action. To tackle the sports bodies, allowing men to compete against women unfairly, but also local councils and others. You've got a whole range of these sort of cases. But how do you stand a chance if the actual court system in this country doesn't obey the law?
Well, exactly. I mean, and you have cases like Sandy Peggy, where you have a judge having to make a decision about what an employer was doing, whether it was lawful for an employer.
This is the NHS nurse being forced to get changed in front of the male doctor.
Exactly, and they've got witnesses there who are trans-identified men, and so the court also has to decide, well, which toilets can they go into? So and the judge is sitting there in a building where the judge doesn't have clear rules about what people should do, and the judge is then being asked to decide on the law. It's crazy. And obviously, judges are not civil servants, but people who work in the courts and tribunal service are civil servants. The whole civil service is working to a policy that was set out by the Cabinet Office in 2019, and which we've also written to them and said, you should withdraw this.
And again, under the Conservatives, I still find this extraordinary, but there we are. They rail against it all now. To be fair, the current leader of the Tories, Kemi Badenoch, has actually been very solid on this when she was a Women's Minister. But we've got the current Education Secretary and also Equalities and Women's Minister, Bridget Phillipson. She has been sitting on a document from the Equality and Human Rights Commission for a very long time. Now, we had this ruling from the Supreme Court, and then we had the Commission issued under previous chairmanship sort of the interim advice saying, basically obey the law, everybody. It's very simple. That's kind of been withdrawn. There's new advice being drawn up. It's been submitted to the government, for months now, and nothing has happened. And we're told that the Bridget Phillipson and her team are getting it legal, even though, of course, it's had numerous legal, eyes looking at it already. So where are we in terms of what the law is? Because I was under the illusion, forgive my naivety, that the Supreme Court, as I say, was the highest court of the land, and that their ruling was so explicit, so clear, there wasn't anything left for dispute.
Absolutely. The law is clear and the law applies now. There's no excuse for waiting for guidance. But unless somebody holds them to account, and I think we're going to have to hold them to account, it seems like the government is not getting their act together. Once they lay this guidance before Parliament, it has to have 40 sitting days before it's approved. they're getting close to running up against the 1-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's judgment. It's getting ridiculous. It's been ridiculous for a long time.
But it's particularly fascinating for a government and a party that bleats on about being obsessed with, rules and laws and obeying the law and the system and then just completely ignoring a very, very clear ruling and ignoring, and again, equality and human rights, ignoring the Commission's own advice.
Exactly. And it puts all the burden on frontline staff, whether that's security staff in a court and tribunal, a job centre officer, somebody working in a sports centre for a local council, anyone in any office, basically, line manager, has to implement these unworkable, unlawful policies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is extraordinary. Well, you keep up the good work, and I know a lot of our audience is very keen. I know, you're always looking for, support and help. You're getting a lot of funding for that. I know the Free Speech Union, who Sam Armstrong's in the studio with me, been involved in a lot of that as well. Keep up the good work, because I'm sorry, we're going to make sure that sanity eventually wins. Maya Furstetter, Chief Executive of Sex Matters there. Sam Armstrong, you're involved with the Free Speech Union. Something like 40% of your cases involve these sort of issues. But it is extraordinary that the Supreme Court is being ignored by lower courts.
Yeah, and they all turn around and say, it's very complicated and it's very complicated.
Just not.
Do you know what, actually? It might just be the simplest policy is a bloke and a woman is a woman. I mean, just, come on.
So I think that was probably transphobic if you check more closely.
The one that got me was the Sandy Peggy case where the judge ruled against her, and then it turned out he'd used AI to write half the judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, goodness me.
I know, absolutely. It's just extraordinary. It really is. Thank you very much. It's been great having your thoughts on international and domestic affairs today, Sam. Delighted to say joining us right now is Ian Collins. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Do you know what I love about you, Julia Hartley-Brewer?
Because you are going to go wrong.
No, you are great for the British economy, because you were away for a couple of weeks. When most people do Butlins, they do a weekend. You do 2 weeks.
I like the holes.
You are propping up the economy.
I like the holes. What can I say?
Yeah,
I don't have a fancy car. I don't have a big house. I don't wear designer clothes. I like my holes.
But you do the bingo in the evening.
I do love
the lovely legs competition.
Do you know what I want to do? Genuinely, have you seen those ads? I want to get all the gang here.
Yeah.
Those like no kids Butlins weekends where it's like sort of an 80s. I reckon that would be a fantastic office bash, but I think HR might get involved.
Do you think so?
I think so. Well, afterwards,
like we went out for that meal that time.
Definitely.
Yeah. One place we're not allowed back in.
Have you had a good Christmas and
It's been lovely, yeah. I did some start. I was working here
well
some
done.
of those
Someone's
days.
got
Yeah,
to.
somebody holding up while you were doing your okey-cokey at Minehead.